My ass is a little wet.
Okay.
You can put that in the outtakes. My ass is a little wet.
Oh, hell yeah, I am. I'm Ken Hauer with the Rubicon Trail Foundation, and this is...
I'm John Arnez.
And we are here at the beautiful Rubicon Springs, home of the Jeepers Jamboree trip, dinner, dance floor, all of that stuff. And we have an awesome interview here today with... You're the color guy.
Oh, so I have to...
Yeah, Tim. His name's Tim.
I've known him for 35 years. His name's Tim. We're gonna interview today Tim Stigen.
Yes, and this is you're going to hear a lot about the tip-to-tip trip, as they call it, where they took the Jeeps with Mark Smith in '78, and Tim was the youngest member of that trip, and he's going to talk a lot about that trip and some of the amazing stories about it. So
it's not going to feel so much like a Rubicon interview, but it is, because everybody who was on that trip was very Rubicon-centric.
Super Rubicon-centric. So hope you enjoy it, and let's go talk to Tim.
Okay.
All right. All right. I'm Ken Hauer from the Rubicon Trail Foundation, and I'm here with John Arnez.
Good to see you, Ken.
All right. And we're here today with Tim Stigen.
Yes, sir.
Who is a Rubicon pioneer. We are here today at the beautiful Rubicon Springs, which is part of RSSI, not related to RTF, completely different organization, but they own the Rubicon Springs. If you have attended Jeepers Jamboree, we are on the dance floor, so that'll give you some perspective. But
we are not
it's a beautiful location, and if you ever happen to come out to Jeepers Jamboree or just want to visit the Rubicon Springs, they have a very modest fee to stay here, and it's a legendary place to stay. So highly, highly recommended.
Yep.
So let's get into it, and we're going to talk to Tim. Go ahead, John. You can take it away.
Okay, so this is the same question I ask everybody. When was your first trip on Rubicon?
1973.
All right, and who'd you go with? Do you remember?
Yeah, my sister bought me a ticket because I rebuilt her Porsche for her, and she bought me a ticket, and I rode in with a gentleman named Joe Lucero, and CJ5, and I rode in the back, him and I think it was his wife, and I rode in the back.
We hope so at this point.
Yeah.
Since you said it.
Yeah, it was. Of course, by now I don't know how old he'd be.
May not make any difference.
May not matter. Yeah. It was an interesting Jeep. I'd never seen one since either. He apparently hill climbed, V8 with a 3-speed, and he hill climbed, and he had an actual metal bar bolted to the brake pedal, and it came up over here like a staging brake, and he could hold the brakes and clutch and gas, and in the rocks.
So he had a manual micro lock.
Manual micro, exactly. He could feather it to whatever he wanted. It was beautiful. I watched him, just, especially with a 3-speed coming through the rocks.
Oh yeah, you're moving quick.
Oh yeah, you're, off and on, and he it was beautiful. And at first I looked at it and said, man, that thing's going to be obnoxious, because it was, like 1.5 inch galvanized with a bike grip on it, but it didn't bother him at all. But yeah, rode through with him, and came back the next year. I had a '72 Bronco that I brought in, and I drove that for many years.
I remember you in the '72 Bronco.
Yellow, yep.
And in the '90s.
Yeah, I had it when the very first Jeep Jamboree, or Little Jamboree, as those of us who were back in the old days. The old days of Jeepers Jamboree, there was a 4-day trip, a 3-day trip, and a 2-day trip. And the 2-day trip was unbelievable, because the guys were drunk before they left Georgetown, and they didn't get any better by the time they got here. And I used to work I still do, work in the mechanics area, and it was a nightmare. They'd get here at 6 o'clock at night with a wrecked Jeep, and you had to have it running by tomorrow. So I believe it was the same year that the YJs came out.
Would have been 87.
87 is when they switched, and they got rid of the 2-day trip, and they put the 3-day trip the next weekend.
And those of us who work for Jamborees call them simply Big Trip and Little
Big Trip and Little Trip. And some people wonder what you're talking about when you say Little Trip, but that's, like you said, when you work on the trail, that's what you call it. And that, when they first started that, it was very strict Jeep only. No Toyotas, no nothing. And I had my Bronco, and they were like, you can't bring it. And I'm like, well, I can't come then. And they finally said, okay, you can bring it, but you have to cover it with a tarp. And so I parked it in the mechanics area, which is where the ice cream parlor is now.
And what year is this?
87 when they started the Little Trip. And so as soon as I parked it, I had to cover it with a tarp. And they made me do that for the years that I brought it in, for the first couple. And then they got a little more lax on that. But yeah, they were very strict. That's why it was called Jeep Jamboree, not Jeepers. Jeepers, you could bring anything. Jeep Jamboree, Jeeps only.
So I work for Jamboree now for just about 35 years, and I feel like that's some time I put in.
Yeah.
But you've worked for them
over 50.
Over 50.
Yeah. Now I did take some time off when I moved up to Alaska. I didn't come down for about a dozen years, and then
and that was in the 90s too, early 2000s?
late middle 90s, and then I started coming back down in. My son came down in 07 and started working, and then I came back in 08 with him, and then I brought my. That's when I brought my expedition Jeep back down, and I came through in 01 when I took my expedition Jeep from here up to Alaska. I didn't think I'd ever be bringing it back down, or anything. So we made a one-day trip all the way through the trail with 5 people in the Jeep in 31-inch tires.
Which we're going to get into what he's talking and referring to, the expedition Jeep.
We will, for sure. So as far as your history with Jamboree, have you always worked as a mechanic? That's been your gig the whole time?
No, when I very first started, back in those days, how a lot of folks started was, especially if you knew Mark, hey, can you give this guy a ride? And you'd give a couple or some people a ride, and then you'd start rock rolling, and you started kind of doing that. And the very first things, Bill Butts used to be one of the directors. I
remember Bill, and I remember
committee
Chris.
members.
I remember Chris as well.
Chris, yeah, the committee members. And when you started as a kid, you dug outhouse holes.
Of course.
You did outhouse holes. You've got firewood. You did that stuff. And back then, they weren't outhouses. They were Sid built. Because Sid Manwaring came up with the design of these 4 walls you brought in, and they were Sid built. And every year, we'd bring a few more in on work party and set them up because they'd get destroyed. Trees would fall on them and stuff. And it behooved you.
They were like just 4 walls.
4 walls and the seat.
I remember seeing
no top.
Yep.
No top.
And they were plywood.
Plywood.
Yeah, plywood.
And they were a sheet of plywood, all 4, and then one side had the door. And so, but they were 4 sheets of, plywood, literally, and they're called Sid built. And like I said, it behooved you to have been here the year before when it came to digging holes, because you knew don't dig over there.
Oh,
dig over here.
Okay.
So what Tim's talking about is the outhouses that, of course, now they're pumped.
Yep.
But the outhouses that used to be here in Rubicon Springs
True outhouses.
were true outhouses. So they had a hole dug under them, and then what you would do is, the next year when you came back in, you dig a hole next to that,
and sometimes
put the dirt off to the side and slide it over, and now you had a new hole.
And then you filled around the bottom to kind of seal up, and
then you use the other dirt to fill in the hole. Well, you need to know
where you dug last year,
which of the 4 directions to move that outhouse.
Yeah.
Yes.
And sometimes when you say you dig next to it, sometimes the next dirt was 25 feet away.
Yeah.
You had to haul that outhouse 15, 20 feet away to find another spot that was soft enough to dig a hole in.
100% remember all that.
Oh yeah, yeah. And there was, and you'd find them with the trees would drop down on them, and people would always put a set of boots coming out of to simulate that someone was in it when got hit by a deal. And there was a picture of.
You know what? When you drive up on them, it would look like you were at Wizard of Oz.
Oh yeah.
And the Wicked Witch had the house. That's exactly.
Oh
what
yeah.
It looked like.
Yep. There was a picture of. I'm pretty sure it was Jim Morton. And they got all ready to take a picture of him, and he's sitting in the outhouse doing what you do in an outhouse, and they were going to open the door and snap a picture of him. And there was a poster for years, used to be in the cook shack area. And so they tied a rope on the handle, and they ripped the door clean off the outhouse. So now
you couldn't close
you can't close it when you're done. There was this picture of him going,
I don't remember the incident, but I remember the picture.
Picture used to be over here. Yeah.
Well, it was a tradition, and
Yeah.
I don't come down to the Springs very often anymore during Jamboree, but
Well, I wouldn't either if I had my place like yours.
but for years and years and years, the blooper pictures from the year before were hung in the kitchen for everyone to see, all the participants to see in the following year.
Yeah. The one picture that created a lot of controversy. My dad used to own the Miners Club in Georgetown for 30 years, and early mid 70s. He's got a marker out there at the graves, Earl Guernsey, and Earl drank a bit, and his Jeep quit at where the old mud hole is. Came through the mud hole, died. And back in the old days, when I used to come in here, the Forest Service and game wardens always rode horses in here. And Doug Fowler, the game warden, just tied a rope to the bumper, tied it to a horn on his horse, and he pulled the Jeep in. It was flat,
my Lord.
Flat ground, pulled it into the mechanics area. And that poster used to sit in my dad's bar for years.
Of him pulling it in with the horse.
And I was told he got fired over that. When somebody reported, that he was abusing that animal, that he had tied the horn on, rope and pulled it in. It was flat ground, but he got in trouble for it.
So for those of you that know this area and have driven this trail, when you come into Rubicon Springs, you go between the two large boulders and you're really close on the right-hand side. As soon as you come out of that, currently, the trail goes to the right and hooks a right and goes and gets up on the rocks and stays up on the rocks till you're
What used to be called the mud hole bypass.
Yep.
It used to be called the mud hole bypass, but by the time Jamboree came around, that mud hole was usually empty, and it was nice. It was a flat ride through a little meadow to get into camp.
But if it was early melt, it
could be pretty muddy.
It was worse than that. I found out years after fixing Jeeps that would come out of there. I found out I had no clue. Just an idiot working in the mechanics pit. And then somebody casually mentioned that they pumped that full.
Mark used to pump it full.
Yeah, they used to, the cook crew that got here first, that was one of their jobs, was to pump that thing full. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's where all our work comes from, and we created this thing? Yeah, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I knew that.
Oh, yeah. And when you walk through it, I just walked through it today.
You can barely tell it's a road at
boulders
this
in there.
point.
There's stuff all over in there that
everyone's whacking on.
And if you ever see, and unfortunately I've never seen them on YouTube. I've seen a lot of people's old videos, but there's corporate movies that when corporate used to do movies in here, and they set up and filmed that with the ice chest flying open and the stuff flying out, and they used to be lined with spectators.
Oh yeah.
Same as the little sluice.
Hecklers.
Little sluice used to have it all there, and they used to have the giant granite rock, the foam boulder, and they'd roll it down on the Jeep and scare the crap out of the guy driving his Jeep.
I did not know about that.
Oh yeah, they'd be up there in that and the gorilla suits.
We used to do the foam boulder on what's now called the Indian Trail.
Yeah,
we did it there quite a bit, and you could see it coming for a long way. And you're terrified the whole time.
Yeah, because in Little Sluice, that wall, and people are up there, and all of a sudden you see something coming down. You're not getting out of there either. No way out of that trench. What else?
I'm gonna turn because my neck is killing me, and you can edit
what
that
happens
out. You can edit that out or turn it into an outtake. I don't care.
It's a blooper.
That's what happens
I'm
when
doing
you get
this.
old.
That is what happens when you get old.
Trust
That's
me.
a fact.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, you mentioned a few minutes ago your expedition Jeep.
Yes.
When you talk about expedition, tell us what you're talking about.
The Expedition de las Americas.
Late November 1978, an expedition of modern explorers set out in the tradition of Marco Polo and Lewis and Clark to go from the bottom of the world to the top, to cross some of the most forbidding jungle on Earth, to make the longest overland journey on record. They were 14 Americans in 6 four-wheel drive vehicles. This is their story.
Also called
the tip-to-tip trip, or a lot of things. It was from the tip of South America to Prudhoe Bay, Alaska. And the main point of that trip was going through the Darien Jungle, which is between Panama and Colombia.
And we're gonna cut right now to B-roll of a very young Tim.
And we are. We are.
Come together to share the dream, the adventure, the hardships, simply for the sake of doing it. Tim Stigen, at 19, is the youngest member of the group. His expectations will be met.
We're just going to have to be like a family and communicate like a family, and everyone will have to express their opinion when it comes to a situation where it's a group decision.
I was 19 then, and I was the youngest guy on the trip, and I still am.
And how many of you are left?
There's 2 of us left that did the entire trip.
So it'd be you and
Mike Arnez.
Mike, who we did the
Yes.
previous episode with, or
Yeah.
the last.
Yeah, and so Mike always, when we are near each other, we always make sure and get together at the picnic or
Sure.
here in camp or wherever.
because you guys had such a crazy experience.
and we know we're the
together.
only ones left.
Yeah.
You know, and but yeah, we did that trip. We had 5 CJ7s, and then we had 2 support vehicles, a Wagoneer and a truck. The
And
Wagoneer.
What year was that?
78. We left in November of 78, and we finished up in April of 79. So it took us 5 months to get the straight line trip was 21,000 miles, and then of course you have to come back out of Alaska. So ballparks, it was 25,000-ish miles, which is funny. We were talking earlier about Mark Smith's Jeep.
Mm-hmm.
It only has 27,000 miles on it now.
So
It's-
he took it on the trip. They were all brand new.
Yep, they were all brand new, and it came in a few years. His son Greg used to drive it a few years afterwards. Then it got put in the museum, and it has 3 of the original tires on it, and then one of them was replaced because in the jungle we took all the spares to put on one of the Jeeps, and so we had to get all new spares when we were done. But yeah, it still has the original tires, and I just recently got that Jeep running, and I was afraid to test drive it. I test drove it in my neighborhood really slow.
Because it's been sitting for
Oh
so
yeah,
long.
the
all
tires, they're
rubbers.
just rotten chunks of rubber hanging off them. They've got tubes in them, but it's back up and running and on the road and useful again. They're all 5 of them are still around.
That's Mark's Jeep, and
That's
you
Mark's.
still have yours.
I've got
I've
one.
seen yours on the
yes,
trail.
and Patty has.
Patty and Steve have that one.
have
Yes.
that Jeep.
Have that Jeep.
Yes.
And I've seen yours on the trail a dozen times or more.
Oh yeah, it's still
you
running.
were, you
every
were
year.
in it 3 or 4 weeks ago on the
I
trail.
came on the big trip with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been the last 2 years. I've been trying to wean it off. I'm trying to retire it because the body is cracking, and I'm trying to retire it. It wheels beautiful. I'm just worried about tearing the body up, and
It
the body.
It
is
probably
the
wheels
Jeep.
so well because it's so flexible because everything's cracked and broken.
Yeah, it flexes like you wouldn't believe. But it's the frame is in good shape. We put WFO has those plates, and we welded them on and fixed the frame 4 years ago or so.
You're welcome, Trevor.
Yeah, no charge for that, Trev. But we just, matter of fact, I was just there and dropped Pittman arm up from him for it the other day. But it wheels great. I'm just now the body is
Yeah, you don't want to tear it
and the
up.
body is the Jeep. I mean, all the stickers and things from the trip.
Yeah.
We've got plaques that were mounted by dealerships in South America and all that stuff. And then when we got out of the Darien Jungle, the Darien Conquistadors was painted on the hood, and mine's the only one that still wheels actively, and has its entire life.
You're right. You got to stop doing that.
Yeah, I know.
You got to preserve that thing.
I'm running out of dash space for plaques too, so I either got to buy another dashboard or stop wheeling it. But I had it, like I said, had it here on the big trip.
So the other one I know about was Al Grimm's, and I worked on Al Grimm's in Buck Island in the '90s.
Yeah.
On an Arnold's trip.
Oh yeah.
But tell me about where Al Grimm's came from and where it went.
Well, that Jeep was. If you look in the video, you'll notice that Jeep does not have an overhead rack on it.
Okay.
It is different than all the other ones because we built those overhead racks in South America at Carlos's shop. Carlos went in the jungle.
Guide Carlos Martinez describes it like this.
For me, the jungle is something like a big temple, something that you admire, but you have to be very precautious. It is not anymore like something that you're going to conquer No, it is different. It is something that you go and meet and get embedded in it and get to live within it. I think with the people that, like us, live most of the time in the big cities, we forget about what's the feel of nature.
He was a four-wheeler from Colombia.
Okay.
And we had all the Jeeps there to put the racks on, and that Jeep hadn't made it back to our rendezvous point to leave to go into the jungle yet. The people that had it had not showed up with it yet, and we didn't think it was coming. So literally the day before were leaving to go into the jungle, the Jeep showed up. And that's why it doesn't have an overhead rack on it. And so when it rolled over in the jungle, it didn't have a rack to stop it from rolling all the way over, and that's how it got the big dent in the hood.
And it has a big dent in the hood.
Still
So
has.
when did it explain when it rolled over? Because I believe it's in the documentary, which we're
If
going
you
to cut
watch
to.
the video, you'll see that Jeep, and Al's driving it at the time, is on a raft we made with our bridging ladders and logs, and he's coming off of the river and coming up an embankment. And it's funny, if you look on that Jeep, on the roll cage is a wood carved bowl that Al had got traded for somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, and on the back of it was my ice chest, which is just used for dry storage. And right after, just as they stopped the filming, right after that Jeep rolled over because the front gears were blown up and it was
I just
getting
felt the
pulled.
raindrop.
And it was getting pulled, and they pulled it to the left, and it rolled over, and that's how it got the big dent in the hood. And the funny thing is, it never broke the bowl that was on top of the roll cage. It straddled the hood and the ice chest.
So that Jeep that was Al's,
Yes. Chris owns that now.
Chris Collard has that now.
Chris Collard, he bought it just a few years ago when it came up for sale.
I didn't know it'd come up for sale. I would have bought it out.
My son did know about it, and he missed it by about 5 minutes. And he saw the Facebook post on it and missed it.
Well, I like Chris, and hooray for him for getting that Jeep.
Oh,
Man,
yeah.
I would have loved to have that.
It's got a great owner for sure.
Absolutely.
But,
Yeah, he has done a lot with it. He's got it up and running and functional. He brought it in here 3 years ago. 3-4 years ago, I think he brought it in.
Well, weren't a bunch of them in here at the same time?
They haven't all been back in here.
We're going to have to ask that question again anyway.
I don't know, man. Hey, obviously, we had a change of venue. The saying in the Sierras is if you don't like the weather, you wait, 10,
5
15
minutes or whatever,
Yeah.
That's exactly the case. So we got deluged on, so we had to move, and we're now underneath an overhang. And
Look at the bright side. I've been snowed on here before, too. So
we got hailed on
in
a
the
few
middle of
minutes
the
ago.
in the middle of summer, yeah.
Great. So anyway, we can go back at it. We were talking about Chris Collard had
Al's Jeep, and we got when it rolled over in the jungle. Like I say, if you watch the video, the video stops, and right after he comes off that barge, that Jeep
But
rolled over.
despite it all, they are determined to press on, and like the explorers before them, to enjoy the adventure for its own sake.
That's when it got the dent in the hood that it still has today. The dent's been modified because they changed engines and had to take some of the dent out.
What about the hood? That's not a factory Jeep hood, is it?
It is a factory Jeep hood.
That's been highly modified?
This is the original hood. This is the original hood. So it was. Oh, you're talking about the dent?
Yeah, the dent.
Oh, I thought you were talking about this graphic
the
across.
graphic is absolutely incredible. Start with that.
That's where that one is. And
So
then
that's Mark's, yours,
and Al's.
and Al's.
And Frenzia from the Frenzia Winery, that was the family of Chip Gash was related to the people in that family. Mm-hmm. And he has that one. And they were here the same year that Chris brought his in, 3-4 years ago.
3 years ago, yeah.
They were going to bring it in, and it's still basically stock like it was. And they got part way and said, no, we don't want to tear it up. And they went back out with it. And then Kevin and Mike, Mike Arnold's Jeep that Mike and Kenny drove. Now Mike and Kevin have that one. And that's the one that when we finished the trip, that's the one that Jeep Corporation kept for a while. And
I didn't know that. What did they
that's
use it
why
for?
it has a new body on it.
Oh,
It got rusty from when Jeep had it, and then it had to get rebodied, and then it was they duplicated the paint and stuff. But it doesn't have any of the stickers from South America because it
that's too bad.
It may have gotten some when they took it back down, but it doesn't have them from the original. I know that's the shame about it. They did lose that, unfortunately.
So did Kevin take that Jeep back down when he and
I believe
Sean
that
and all those
yeah,
guys did that
yeah,
trip?
It was Kevin and I'm not sure who all went.
It was Jim Morton.
Yeah,
And it was Kevin, Sean Gulling,
Yeah.
and I don't know who else, but it was
Yeah.
a whole group of
yeah.
that crew.
Chris went too. I
Chris
believe Collard went
Okay.
down there, and I'm not sure who else went. Al maybe went on that.
I don't
Yeah.
think so. Did Al Graham?
Yeah, I thought he had something to do with it.
Maybe
He
so.
maybe didn't go on it, but he had something to do with it. Yeah. So
what-
that's all 5 of those of the CJs, and then the truck got sold.
Now explain the truck. What was the
yeah,
truck
yeah,
there
yeah.
for?
The truck was a 3/4 or 1-ton Jeep pickup, of course, with a service body and a canopy on it, hard canopy, and that was parts and stuff like that, and that was driven down by Al to Panama, and it was just left in Panama. Matter of fact, Ken flew out of the jungle at one point to get some parts out of that, and then went back into the jungle.
Jeez.
And then that one was sold to a construction company. I believe it was one that Brett Collins, Ken's son, worked for. Mm-hmm. And they bought it. And then the Wagoneer was bought by Bob Goodpasture, who was on the trip with us. And then many years later, it got wrecked, got wrapped around a tree at Camp Verner area. And so I don't know where the truck is, but I know the Wagoneer is gone. It got totaled. But all 5 of the Jeeps are still operational. Mine's the one that comes in here all the time. Like I said, I'm running out of dashboard space for plaques and stuff. It's been progressively modified over the years, just because of what it takes to get through here now compared to 45 years ago.
Then, yeah.
We had those Jeeps in here the very first time on a work party in '78. We had all 5 of them in here.
And that was after the trip.
No, it was before the trip. They were brand new. They were made in May, June of '78, and they were in here in July.
Got it.
And
And you guys went in November, so.
yeah, and so they came in here. Part of it was to promote the trip and everything, have them in here for Jamboree and all that, and stuff. And they were in here back on factory, 29-inch tires.
And back in the late 70s,
Oh, that's
what
not a
everybody
problem.
ran, yeah.
Yeah, they had those Jeeps were on purpose very bare bones. They were a track lock rear end and in a Dana 20 or Model 20 rear end, open front end, Model 30 or a Dana 30 front end, open, no power steering.
Armstrong steering.
Yeah, Armstrong steering.
So you did
Granny
that.
gear 4-speed.
You did that just so they would
In case,
have
nothing to break.
nothing to break.
Nothing to break, and how much fluid do you carry, and
Sure.
and no radios, no nothing. They didn't, because in some of the countries in South America you couldn't have a radio, so we didn't have radios in them. Nothing.
So that gets to one of my questions that I've always wanted to know. Right, it's 25,000 miles. How many miles did you change the oil, fluids? Did you,
AMSOIL.
because you just use
We got
AMSOIL.
sponsored by AMSOIL.
Wow.
They donated the fluid to us. There's a sticker still on the side of my Jeep, and not a promotion commercial for AMSOIL, but I will say this: that was one of the things I did was I did a lot of the prep on the Jeeps, changed all the fluids, changed the gear oil and transmission, and within a mile of driving those, you could feel the shifting difference in the transmissions on those.
Huh.
I was amazed. I was actually like, hey, this feels
This feels
different.
better.
Yeah.
You know, I was just
Well,
like, wow.
If you think about it, though, back then
Oh,
there was
yeah.
a giant difference between Amsoil and anybody else. Now the
Yeah.
gap is, very small
but
between
back
all
then
of
you
the,
had gear oil, period.
Yeah, but
and
you-
they
your
had
options were
Amsoil,
Dinosaur.
which was you know, it was
or
just shy
Mad
of coal.
Scientist. There was no
Yeah,
no
it
middle.
it was just shy of coal. You know, so it was pretty impressive to
That is
see the difference,
amazing.
and that's what we ran on the trip. That was one of our few sponsors. Because we paid our own way on the trip.
Right. That's what
You know,
Mike
I was
said.
gonna ask you that question. How did a 19-year-old pay for that trip and have the time
Yeah.
off to do it?
One, I just, 19, I didn't have, I was a volunteer fireman, but I wasn't,
You weren't
I
obligated.
I wasn't a fireman. I worked for the fire department as a volunteer to work on equipment and stuff because Georgetown at the time you had to be 21 to respond on calls for insurance reasons. But I used to do a lot of work on the equipment. Jack Anderson was the fire chief at the time, and he's actually the one who recommended to Mark that I should go. You know that they were looking for people because Mike talked about it. You know, Mark took 12 years to plan that.
The 21,000-mile trek begins in the cold and fog of Cape Horn, the tip of South America. But to Mark Smith, lumberjack, contractor, four-wheel drive specialist, and expedition leader, it is the fulfillment of a dream.
Four-wheeling and a challenge, something as a Darien has been a challenge to me for, as I say, a 12-year period. But just something I feel we can do. I feel we have the men, the equipment, the knowledge, and the background to do something like this.
12
Well,
years.
you know, a lot of at the first time everybody said, "Hey, I want to go." Well, 12 years later,
They went.
they were like, "Well, you know, I'm too old. I've got a career. I just don't want to go. Whatever."
So it narrowed the field.
Oh yeah. Next thing you know, there's nobody. You know, half the people didn't want to go or couldn't go. So there was an opening, and I went.
Wow, that's
And,
amazing.
How I went, okay, you know, they of course, I'm 19. They asked my folks, you know, or my folks were talking to them, and they said, "Well, we have some college money saved up for Tim." And I don't know really what the rest of the conversation was because I was already outside with my backpack getting in the Jeep, so I really don't know what else they talked about. I do know because Mike Arnold has told me many times that he talks about. Right, because my dad drove a whole gang of us down to the airport in San Francisco in the motorhome. We had a whole bunch of people that went on the trip. We all piled in the motorhome. We drove to San Francisco when we flew out. And my dad talked to Mike and Kenny, at the airport, and he's like, "You bring him back." And they put that obligation on Mike was you bring him back.
Wow. And the Jeeps were shipped via a ship to the
we
tip,
shipped them.
tip
We
of-
drove them to Long Beach about a month and a half before. We drove them to Long Beach. On the way down there, they finished up the agreement with Goodyear to get the tires. So we went to a tire dealership in Southern California. I don't know, Long Beach, LA, somewhere.
Somewhere down there.
And we got 4 sets of the Goodyear Wrangler RTs. The bias tires, love those tires. I'd buy them today if I could buy them. They were fantastic. 31 inch, they were huge. Right in the day.
Like
31
Armstrong True Tracks. You were on monsters.
You were somebody. We had 4 sets of those, and then we had this set of tires that I jokingly refer to when I talk to them as that they were still warm when we got them because they were literally out of the mold.
plant. Yeah.
They didn't even say Goodyear on them. They were just a radial tire, and they were the only set that were radials. And they are what now is the Goodyear Wrangler radial. They were a prototype or whatever you want to call them. We had to actually wait for those tires to get there. That was part of the thing. We waited, and they put those tires on, all 5 of them. We put a set of 5 on there and 5 on everyone else. And they were fine until we got to the jungle, and we lost all of them the first day or two in the jungle. Thorns went through the sidewalls. And so we took the spares off all the other Jeeps, put it on that Jeep, and then we had no spares for the rest of the jungle. And so we had to stitch tires and boot tires and silicone them and
Tubes and everything. Yeah.
We didn't have a whole lot of issues, but we had no spares from right there.
And you knew it.
And exactly, you knew. And if you watch that video, that's how I can tell in the video at what point that was actually being filmed at, because sometimes they just use, hey, here's a great shot of Jeeps going down the road, but when you look and they'll have just a rim on the back and no tire. Okay, that was after the jungle.
Okay.
So you know,
I'm going to find out where that was.
Yeah, and that's how.
On the 6th day, they crossed the foothills of the Andes and the Argentine border into the lake country of Chile. In the afternoon,
I love to watch the video with a group of people, because I'll pause it and go through, okay, this is how this went. And I still have a 16 millimeter copy of that video, or the movie. And back in the day, I used to go to high schools and schools with it. And matter of fact, I went to one of my daughter's classes in Anchorage with it, and brought my Jeep there, and the whole bit.
Sure.
I used to do, but back, right after the trip, for several years, we would do the dog and pony show and go into schools and talk about the trip and that stuff.
Can we find it? Would you be okay at some point if we could find a lab that would take that original movie and turn it into 4K video? Because they can do that now.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's on YouTube. It's also on DVD.
But the resolution's poor.
Okay, yeah. Well, no, I got no problem with that. Yeah,
we'll take it to a real professional place.
Because I know Mark at one time had it on VHS, and for those of you who don't know, that was the big disc. No. And then he had it put on disc.
That was the video version of 8-track tapes.
Yes. Yeah. Hey, I remember 4 tracks, so lighten up, buddy. But no, I still have it. I know right where it is. It's in the house.
I think
and
would
it's been in a case, so it's probably
because there are copies of it. Like there's random channels have it.
When you see it on YouTube, it's rough.
On the Jeepers Jamboree, it's rough. But if we have the original version of it, I'm pretty sure we can get it.
Yeah,
we can get it done in and they can do it in 4K, and it'll be like it was original.
Yeah.
So my questions are here, the nerd in me. One, how did that documentary happen? Like how was that process, or how did that even come about? And two, how did it going from country to country in terms of like getting across borders and things like that?
The one is very easy. It was film crew, Jeep,
provided,
paid for, provided, whatever.
Oh, okay.
So at times there was an entire film crew, sound, the whole bit. There would be
like
guys
when you're that scene when you're at the campfire and you're all sitting around you're cooking your food.
And there's there's lighting and the whole bit. And there's interviews, like when we were in Valparaiso waiting on the ships. There's interviews, and there was the whole film crew was there. When we were in Alaska, you'll see there's helicopter shots and stuff. So the whole crew would meet up with us. But a gentleman, a younger guy, he was 25, 20, 30 years old. Stuart Asbjornson was the photographer. His name's in the credits. Okay. And he rode through with us.
So he's the one filming in the jungle.
And so he had limited, because you got to remember, he literally was using film, and there was no lithium batteries, there was no nothing.
Yeah.
So if you'll notice, there's a few times where the sound is a little slower than normal, because that's
the battery had died.
That's the best he had available at the time. But it was all Stuart was there with film, and he had to, he could only carry X amount. So he did what he could, and he did record some sound, but most of the time, like the first 3 days in the jungle, I guess it was 3 total. The film crew was with us when we got off the barge. They filmed us going in the first day and filmed around the camp, got a lot of noise, sound, chainsaws,
B-roll.
all that stuff, B-roll. And then we took them back to the barge, or a boat, and then they went off. Now, triple canopy jungle, you chop your way. There's 30 feet tall is brush. Then there's trees that are 50 feet tall. Then there's trees that are 150 feet tall. Mm-hmm. And they don't have a branch on them till they get 150 feet up, and then they go,
Yeah.
Well, when we went to take those guys back to the boat, we had to cut some of that brush that had come back into the tunnel that we had cut.
Al Grimm told me that.
Yeah,
it
was insane.
That the plants would grow back in 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
So you didn't send the crews too far ahead to cut,
because
if you didn't get there that day, you had to cut it all over.
The cutters go out ahead of us, and they start cutting all the vines, the small trees that they can get with a machete. They seem to move along quite well. They're learning what it takes to get a Jeep to a certain point. Then we follow up usually about an hour, hour and a half behind.
Yeah, and we taught the native guys how to run a chainsaw and how to sharpen a chainsaw, sort of.
Oh my God.
But they would sharpen all of the left teeth on one time, and so you'd be going along and you'd see the cuts
I think we'd be making a turn.
like this,
Yeah.
and then a little while later you'd see the cuts went like that because they finally stopped and sharpened the other half of it.
Oh my gosh.
And it was funny, and they got, and they did it strictly by eye, but they got to within an inch or two of the width of a Jeep, and they would cut those trees that were down. And then there's I don't know what kind of tree they are. There's a huge tree down there. I have a picture of my Jeep parked in the web of that tree. And a CJ7 with a rack on the back and on the front and everything is not short. And it's fitting inside the web of that tree. And the tree itself is almost as big as the CJ. And when those things go down, there's no getting through. You don't cut through. You go around them.
They're too big.
And yeah,
too
they're
big
just, they're huge. And the wood's useless. It's it's not good for anything, that wood. They just sit there and rot,
Yeah.
And when they cut them down, they build a platform about 10 feet up because the root webbing is there, and then they just start chopping at it, and then the
Over it
thing comes
goes.
down.
We'll circle back to the customs issue, but you brought up something that dawned on me that I've always wanted to know is we obviously know about the Darien Gap, and it still is the Darien Gap for the most part. Was that the only how many miles is it? I think it's like 11 or 12.
We did.
I'm not 100% sure.
We did roughly 102 miles, and took us 31 days to go through the jungle.
So the Darien Gap is 100 miles.
Yeah, 100, plus or minus.
It was
And
then.
how many
it
days
was
to
then.
get through the jungle?
31 days.
A whole month.
Yeah.
And was that the only real four-wheeling, and most of it was pavement, or was there other areas that you had four-wheeling?
In South America, we drove about 11,000 miles, and 9,000 miles of that was gravel. And when I say gravel, I mean
because back
softballs.
Because back then, in the 70s, South America probably didn't have very many paved roads. They
Yeah,
were probably mostly
we
gravel
hit paved
roads.
road when we got to Colombia, and it was like night and day. There's all of a sudden you're on paved road.
That must have been like, oh my
And then
God, the silence.
in Buenos Aires, right in town, in the city, you'd have pavement, and same thing in Santiago. But as soon as you got outside the city, it was gravel, and then Central America was mostly paved road, and then of course going up to Alaska, it was back then. The Alcan was
gravel.
mostly gravel in Alaska, in Canada, but it was wintertime. So it's really nice because they blade it and it's smooth. It's ice, but it's got rock and sand and that, and it's smooth. And we kept hearing, hey, it's paved when you get to Alaska. It's paved and we're like, all right, it's paved. Yeah, it's also frosty like you wouldn't because you can't plow it like you can the snow. We got to Alaska and we were doing that.
At last, they descend through the Brooks Range. Mark Smith speaks of the contrast.
We did hit snowstorms coming up through Canada, and also into Alaska. We hit some fierce winds and heavy drifting snow that cut our visibility down to about 25 feet. Temperatures down to 50 below zero with the chill factor, and it was completely different than what we have done. We've gone temperature changes, or spreads have gone from let's say 50 below to 105 degrees. That's about 155 degrees difference in our temperatures.
Talk about border crossings.
Yeah.
In Central America or South America, you literally had border crossing issues. You're at the here's X country and X country, and you're dealing with. But in some of those countries, they would have every so many miles there would just be a checkpoint, and it'd be a gate down across the road, and there'd be a guy there. And during the day, especially, he'd check on you and you'd do this stuff. But at night, he'd be asleep in the building in there. So you'd pull up and you're waiting, because sometimes we're trying to go. So we're driving all day. Yeah. And you got enough people in the Jeep, you just rotate drivers.
Yeah.
Well, you'd go out there and pretty soon he'd yell out, "Passe, passe," and you'd just raise the thing and go through and put it down when you got through it.
Because he didn't want to get up.
No.
Yeah.
The stupid thing is, probably the worst actual crossing we ever had was going into Alaska from Canada. And I don't know if the guy just had a bored day or what, but he made us empty the Jeeps. It was winter time. We had to put all of our stuff out on the ground, and he went through everything. We're like, dude, if we were smuggling something from Central America,
We wouldn't
the
do
guy
it.
would have caught it in Arizona, or when we crossed over.
And we probably wouldn't do it in 5 orange Jeeps.
Well, that was the other thing. If you look on the side of the Jeep, it says Chile, Argentina to Alaska via the Darien Gap. Everybody says, why does it say Chile and Argentina? Because they're still arguing over who owns Tierra del Fuego.
Yes, they are.
We did not want to get involved with putting Chile or Argentina on it and then irritating somebody. So that's why they say Chile to Argentina, because they still dispute who owns Tierra del Fuego.
Wow.
And that's why we did that. And the other thing we found out is that official vehicles, we landed in Santiago. Well, we flew into Santiago. Jeeps came into Valparaiso at a port there, and then we drove down Chile, crossed into Argentina
to get to the tip.
And there was all that controversy going on. Guess what color the government vehicles in Argentina were in 1978?
Orange?
Yeah, they were bright orange. And you drive up to that guy at the port, and he sees these bright orange vehicles coming at him. He was not impressed. So we had things like, we got arrested in a little town called Vulcan, Argentina, little side of the road village. And when I say arrested, we got detained in there. They're just a shakedown thing, one of those type deals.
Mm-hmm. Which is pretty common in South America and Central America.
We learned very quickly that you were actually better off not acknowledging that you could speak Spanish.
Oh.
Because then now we're negotiating. If you just go, I don't know what you want. No comprende. I don't know what you want. Eventually they just give up, or they'll point at something and
and you give it to them
and you give it to them and off you go. But if you get negotiating, now we're literally, that was like our ships. We were sitting in Valparaiso. Our ship was sitting out in the bay. You could see the windshields on the Jeeps reflecting in the light while the ship bounced out there. And every day we would go down to the port and see if our ship was going to come in. But all of the captains or the shipping companies were negotiating with the port people about which ship was going to come in. And of course, we didn't have any power to control anything. So we just, every day we'd go down there and, I think we waited like 5 days there to get our ship to come in, which is part of the reason we kind of had to speed through a lot of South America, or the first part, so we drove all night long kind of thing, because we lost 5 days right there.
You're trying to catch
and
up
the
with your
whole
schedule.
point, part of the deal was, we had to get into the jungle at the beginning of the dry season, but we also had a lot of there was a group of people went through South America, a group of people went through the jungle, and a group of people went through from the jungle north, or from Sacramento north. But some people never planned to do all of the trip.
Gotcha.
Okay. We always had 15, 20 plus people, but 8 people made the whole trip. So, but people had plans for Christmas and this kind of stuff. So, hey, we got to get to this place. We got to get to Bogota by this time.
So I can get my flight and go home.
Get my flight and go home, or get my flight and meet people for Christmas. Because Mike talked about that. And
He did.
Sherry and him met up in Mazatlan or somewhere, I think. I stayed in Bogota. I was, broke kid at the time.
Sure.
So I actually stayed in Bogota. Funny, one of my best friends in high school had a foreign exchange student in high school from Colombia. So my buddy flew down and spent the 2-week Christmas break with me, and his foreign exchange student, Victor, met us, and we spent the 2 weeks together, the three of us.
You had a local guide.
And we had a local
place
guy.
to stay
We spent time in Bogota, and then we went up to Medellin, because that's where his family was from. We spent a week there and a week in Bogota, and then we got back down there, and then we started when everybody came back, we built the racks and did all the stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
So border crossings, though, not too big of a problem. The one that was the most notable to me was from Costa Rica into Nicaragua. 1979 Nicaragua. Study your history.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow, that's
so
not a
we
great...
come up to the Costa Rica border, going into Nicaragua, and the guy there tells us we have the wrong visas to get either out of Costa Rica or into Nicaragua. I don't know for sure. So sent three guys back in the Wagoneer to I think San Jose, Costa Rica, somewhere in Costa Rica, to get the correct visas. And the guy at the border tells us, he says, there's a really nice beach right down, just down the road a little bit. You guys
So you're on the Pacific side.
Yeah, you can camp on the beach down there. We're like, oh, cool. And this is where I learned, never let the photographer drive. Because he's busy about looking for what makes good filming. And so Stuart's like, hey, I'll drive. So he drives from the border to the beach, 10 miles or less. And I'm in what's Mark's Jeep. And I got all my stuff in it. I've been living in it, kind of thing. We moved from Jeep to Jeep. But coming north, I drove Mark's Jeep all the way to Prudhoe and then back. And so Stuart drives, and we're on a gravel road, and he's looking around, and he drops the right rear wheel into the gravel ditch. And he did like everybody does, and overcorrects and went into the left-hand ditch, and we rolled it on. That's why Mark's Jeep has a black windshield frame on it.
Did not know that.
It rolled the windshield frame, broke the glass. Mm-hmm. So we went to camp on the beach. We beat the windshield frame out to where it was flat. We turned the windshield around, so we had the good side and the driver's side. And then when we went to all the border crossings, the mirror was facing forward. Guys would look at you when you came forward, But that night, you can hear gunfire all night long. All this activity.
It was the Sandinistas.
Yeah, and so then we go up to the border. We go through, and the beautiful building in Costa Rica. Costa Rica's beautiful. They're building it brand new. It's really nice. You drive in, and hey, the first bridge is gone. Well, we'll just go through the creek, and then you get to this building that's all shot to hell, and mortar or gunshots in it and everything else, and crossed into Costa Rica, into Nicaragua, and we drove straight through Nicaragua, just quick as we could. And in 1978, or this is 79 now, because if you were going to go to the jungle, where would you get clothing to go to the jungle? You're going to be in a jungle.
I don't even know.
No idea.
Well, what just ended not too long before that?
Oh, the Vietnam War.
Vietnam War.
So you had military clothing.
Of course, you go to military surplus, and you get fatigues, jungle boots, and all that stuff.
So you went in an orange Jeep to the area where the Sandinistas were and dressed like a soldier.
No, we weren't dressed like a soldier yet, which was probably worse. We were in our regular clothes now because we're out of the jungle. So you put all that stuff in the bottom of the Jeep because I don't want to wear it anymore. But when you get to a guy who's checking things out and he starts emptying your Jeep and he finds where you've hidden all this jungle gear, they get a little nervous. And
probably should have just thrown it in a dumpster.
And yeah, you should have. And we had the machetes, we had it all, and that's where we also learned how to tell who was in charge at those places. Because you had military pants, but a shirt. You had a military shirt and maybe the pants, but the guy with the hat,
that's the guy in charge.
He's the guy in charge. And you'd be out there and these guys, and of course, we're all, from America, we knew guns. They're all waving their machine guns around, but nobody's got a clip, no magazine in them. But they can control a whole group of people. They've never owned a gun. They didn't know. We'd look at it and go, okay, well, I'll pay attention, but I'm not too worried.
I'm not intimidated by.
No, I'm not intimidated by an empty gun. But when the guy with the hat came out, you knew that's when things got serious.
Wow.
But his gun might even have bullets.
It might, or he knew where they were. But yeah, we got when we got detained in Vulcan, Argentina, that was, because your passport is, when you travel out of the country, you don't let your passport out of your sight. Mm-hmm. And the first thing the guy did was open the drawer, threw all our passports in, and took a machine gun out. And now even if we run, our passports are still in there. Even if his gun's unloaded, it don't matter. Our passports are still in there. So the stuff like that was, you went, well, okay.
That's intimidating.
Yeah. Yeah, and we spent a few hours there where they,
You were probably lucky that you were 19.
Oh, I know. It's too stupid to know any better.
Didn't know how.
Yeah.
Extremely dangerous that was.
Yeah. My definition of South America as a stupid young kid at 19 was, no habla, y'all. I literally, that was, what did I know? And like I said, because we had some people that spoke a fair Spanish. And when we first started out, they would, and then we realized that the negotiation issue was not working well. And eventually we were like, no, we don't even need that. We can point and we can get through, which we did. And in the jungle, the native population speaks a dialect different. They don't speak true Spanish, and they don't. And even the missionaries don't have a 100% translation with them. So they do fairly well. And I have a funny anecdote about that. Years later, I was at a church, and there was a missionary there doing his fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
And he's showing slides, and I'm like, I've been to that village. I know right where that is. And so I talked to him after he does his presentation, and I said, you should come to my house for lunch. I want to show you some things. Well, and of course, everybody asks him to lunch.
Sure.
So I think, well, thank you very much. I says, I got a question for you. Do the kids in your village play baseball? And he goes, yes. And we don't know how they learned it. And I said, come to my house, and I'll tell you how they learned it. So I got my photo albums out, and he's like, that's so-and-so. He's the village elder. I live in that building right there. That's where I live, in this village. And so I told him, that's when I told you Ken flew out to get parts.
Yeah.
So we were there for a couple days in this village, and we're
Sitting around.
nothing to do. So we took the gas cans off the Jeep, and we made bases, and these kids had a ball, and we went and got a stick, and we taught them how to play baseball. And we played baseball with these kids in the village. Well, when the missionaries tried to figure out how they learned this, these guys had never seen a car or a vehicle, so they didn't have a word for car, right? Yeah. So they described something that came out of the jungle, and it made noise. Well, to the missionary guys, they were thinking
they were
thinking monsters and demons. That's the words they were understanding from the natives, and they didn't want to promote any of this, so they didn't pursue it in depth as to what really happened and how, because the guy was telling me, he says, we just basically shut down the conversation because that's not what we were trying to promote, was demons and things like that.
That's wild.
And it's so funny, but he's looking literally through my photo albums. I've got 5 albums that, the pictures are, most of them are actual camera, but some are Polaroid. But he's literally like, I live in that building right there. That's where I live, and that's a village elder now, and this is who this guy is in this place.
Oh, there's Bob.
Yeah, I mean, literally, he was like, I know that guy, you know. But it was really funny because what the hook to him though was, do they play baseball? He goes, yeah, and we don't know how, So, but that was the thing in the jungle. There was no pure translation, a lot of pointing and stuff. And what we would do is we would pick up a guy at your village. You knew how to get to his village, but from the rest of the world from there was, I don't know.
Yeah.
And so you would go back home, and somebody from your village would take us to the next village, and then he'd go back home, and and we killed a big anaconda snake, about 18 feet long, one day, and in the jungle. And so we cut the head off, and the bridging ladders, we threw the snake up in there, and they were gonna cook it for dinner. And the natives just were like, this snake, we don't want to eat it. Well, when we got to the place we were camping, the snake was gone. You know how when you cut a head off a snake, they still move around. So, he flopped out of the Jeep.
Oh, God.
And these native guys thought that snake was going to be coming after them at night.
Oh, geez.
And we got up the next morning, and half of them were gone. They
gone.
went back to their village. They wanted nothing to do with that snake that was coming to get them.
Or the crazy white guys that killed it.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, there was, there was a lot of, like I said, when I sit with somebody and we watch the video, you can really tell a lot of because it's condensed down to 27 minutes. 5 months condensed down to 27 minutes, and most of it is concentrating on the jungle because that was by far the hardest technical or aspect of it. There were issues everywhere we went. We had issues in Canada even. There's a place called Watson Lake where the signpost, and I don't know if you've ever driven the Alcan Highway. Watson Lake, it used to be, at the time, it was just a whole bunch of signs on the side of the road. When the military guys built it, they'd already, it's 10,000 miles to my house here, they put a sign up.
Sure.
Now they have this, what's called a sign forest. It's still it's a bigger city now. But, so we were all pulled over and we're taking pictures of all these signs. Here comes this wheezing Canadian cop car. It finally caught up with us. We weren't going that fast, but finally catches up. Apparently we were speeding. And he was going to give us tickets and write us up. And apparently when you get a ticket in Canada, you have to go to, so we left. And Mark was terrified, though, that this guy was going to get us.
Had some power, yeah.
Because we got 5 orange Jeeps driving up the road, right? So Kenny Arnold and I, whenever we'd go to a restaurant or whatever, we would have the guy page Mark and stuff like that. It's officer so-and-so would page him, and we would always do that. And if you ever seen, Mark he was a very good friend, came to Alaska many times to visit with me. I did 2 trips for him up there for his company. And Mark always signed his name, Mark A. Smith.
Yep.
Very, very colorful signature, which many of us know how to do. And because Mark was in charge, and so Mark authorized everything when we were needing.
So when you wanted something
so when we
authorized?
needed something, we would sign for it. And Mark always never could figure out, I don't remember paying for that, when we would need something.
Oh my God.
So in the early days of Jamboree, back, many years ago, the crew, it was a nonprofit organization at the time. We went to a place called the Coral Reef in Sacramento. It's a big restaurant, and they could cater to hundreds of people. And we would have a dinner shortly before the work party and the Jamboree, and that's where you got all your, kind of like the picnic is now, where
sure.
you would get your information, this is where you're going to do, who's with you, and all that stuff. And we'd have a huge dinner, and all of us would be there. Well, in '79, when we had that dinner, the first dinner after that trip, Mark always played jokes and did stuff. So he thought it'd be really funny. He had the guy from the restaurant bring the check over to me. I'm sitting at a table off here. Mark's on the head table up there. He brings a check over to me, and I didn't bat an eye at it. I just signed Mark A. Smith.
Sure.
And the guy brings it back up to Mark, and Mark looks down and he sees his signature on that thing, and you see him like.
He
just realized that's what happened. Yeah, Kenny could sign his name like nothing, piece of cake. But yeah, it was so funny.
And Kenny was well known as a prankster.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Kenny was something else. Died way too early. But Mark was one of those guys that. That's what his book, Driven by a Dream, one of the books. I'm working in Alaska. I work for Anchorage Fire, and he like I said, he came up several times, him and Merlin, and then I ran 2 trips for him, a winter trip and a summer trip we did up there. Mark calls me. Guess where I am? I'm walking around the firehouse on my cell phone. Guess where I am? I said, Mark, with you? I have no idea. He says, I'm on the North Pole in a Russian nuclear-powered icebreaker.
What?
Now, how he got on that thing, I don't know, but that's the kind of stuff he did.
Yep.
He wanted to do something, he did it. And he was a hell of a promoter, and he was one of those guys, if he decided he was going to do something, it happened.
Which is why the tip-to-tip trip
Oh yeah,
happened.
exactly. It's why a lot of this stuff exists.
Sure.
This trip exists.
Sure.
He was, why he put that together and decided we were going to do it.
And Mike mentioned that during the thing, like Marx was masterful at getting the right people involved.
Yeah.
Like if I need somebody that's a lawyer, I'm going to bring them in for some Jeep thing, and now I have a lawyer that I know, and now I have a doctor that I know.
He was a great promoter, and he knew how to use those contacts and those things. His job list is incredible.
He was a deputy sheriff in El Dorado County for several years.
He ran the airport in Tahoe for a while. He did all kinds. It's crazy.
That happened more back in the day. Now people specialize, I'm in IT or I'm in marketing or whatever. But back then, people had they were driving a truck, they were a fireman, they were flew an
his
airplane.
real estate office.
He
had the real estate office. That originally that was kind of and Irene ran that mostly. Patty has it now today. That's what she has. But he had, like I said, he would whether it was building buildings or projects, the Buffalo Hills Center, all that stuff. Sometimes these things took years but his vision that I'm going to do this stuff, it was crazy. Like I said, he came up to Alaska, and by then he was actually working for Jeep Corporation, and he would go to foreign countries with the opening of a model of a Jeep, and he would be there to present and demonstrate it and all that. And he came up to Alaska, like I said, many times with us, and we did, he stay there for him and Merlin would come up there, and we did a winter trip and a summer trip up there, and we went up to the Knik Glacier, and we went all kinds of places. Did dog sleds and horse sled trips, and sleigh trips, and all kinds of stuff. And rental Jeeps. They were always rental Jeeps, so that was always interesting. You had to be careful what you were doing with rental Jeeps.
Mark's vision was incredible, right? Because obviously the Jeepers Jamboree and what's become of the Rubicon Trail.
Well, and the Springs.
Well, that's what I was going to get at.
Yeah,
so when I started, my first trip was 79. I think you said it was 78.
78 was my first trip.
Yeah, my first Jeepers Jamboree was 1980. My uncle took me for my high school graduation, was my present. Wow. And so in the
walker out now. So.
So in the mid 80s, when Mark purchased the property, of course, there was no internet. Nobody knew anything. We just knew that somebody had bought this property. And of course,
we were worried.
We were literally over here at the rope swing, the campground that's across from the rope swing.
Yeah.
And we were terrified that somebody was going to close it off, and this was going to be somebody's fancy little playground or something. And and Mark, said, in many interviews, it's, if I buy this, if they ever try to close it, I'll just give a key to 3,000 of my closest friends. Was his little saying that he had.
Yeah.
And which we'll play that.
As a property owner, they cannot shut you off from your land, and if that were the case for any environmental reason they closed it, I would offer a lot of gift certificates to visit my land and my property on the Rubicon.
Right there. We'll sneak that in there right there. But so how I got involved with Rubicon Trail Foundation, and I've given this in some speeches, was that moment of not knowing that Mark had bought this and that he did it to make sure that it stayed open. That was when I decided to join the board. Was you can either know what's going on, you can either make stuff happen going on, or you can wonder what the blank just happened. And I never wanted to be in the what the blank just happened back when Mark purchased this.
Oh, I can many times over the years.
So
it was going to be closed. It was going to be closed because of this issue and that issue. And
if you're watching this right now and you're 20 some odd years old, you have no idea how terrified that we thought the Rubicon Trail was done in the 50
years. That's this agency is going to close it for this, or that agency is going to close it for that, and things that you'd be like, well, I know Bob Sweeney was talking about one of the things more recently was the water runoff, and you got to keep going in there. And he said, well, what do they do on Highway 80 for the water runoff and the highways? And they will, well,
the answer, we digress, but the answer to that is they have a discharge permit.
Yeah.
And there's no discharge permit on the Rubicon Trail.
But, that's the kind of thing where they always, somebody will find some reason to claim that, and there's, like you said, we know this lawyer and we know this guy that does whatever. I remember right here, the water system. I remember when we had to put that in, Chris's dad, Rick Prince, and he worked for the water company. We built the very first water purification system
Richard,
we built that over here, all that stuff, because you can't have all those people and not have purified. Okay, well, we'll put in water. Ron Duncan from the health department. He used to come through and do mosquito spraying, and they all the stuff that used to, and somebody'd come up. Well, that's why they're now the outhouses are not outhouses; they're porta potties that get pumped.
That's because of the cleanup and abatement order.
Yeah, exactly. That stuff. There's, you find out about it, and then what's the fix? How do we make this work?
Ron Duncan had an old flat fender. Yeah, you know what I'm going to tell. Ron Duncan had an old flat fender, and he put a tank of mosquito stuff on the hood, or kind of on the right side of the hood, and he plugged that into the intake manifold with a little orifice, and he would drive around camp in first gear, floored, wide open, and the smoke would billow out of the back of it, and there'd be a cloud of mosquitoes dying behind him.
Remember one year that Reagan here,
seems totally safe.
Engines making a lot of noise. So we go over to check it out, and we literally had to use. We were working a work party. We were set up shop, we had to use an axe to beat the hood latches. They were frozen shut. We beat the hood latches open. When's the last time you checked the oil on this? Get the hood up, no oil in it. Add some, well, that noise went away.
Look, it runs way better with oil in it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But you know, that was part of what, like you were saying. Ken Collins owned a Jeep dealership. That's where we ordered the Jeeps from. But you know, Ken ran the shop, which is where the ice cream parlor is now. That used to be the shop.
Ken Collins shares the dream and the leadership responsibilities.
We made a couple of trips down into this country and found that we felt that it really was possible. We heard all kinds of stories, discouraging tales, but we're not people that are easily discouraged.
Ran that for years.
I remember when they moved it, and all the mechanics were up in arms.
Yeah,
they were so upset.
Brett did the move over there, and it's funny, as I brought Brett in on work party this year. He hadn't been in since the 50th.
Wow!
And it was his first time back in, and I said, "Hey, Brett, you know, I've been doing work for him on his own equipment. I've known him, Brett, forever." And I said, I got an open seat on work party. You want to come in? He says, "Yeah, I wouldn't mind coming. I don't have to work on anything, and just come in on the trip." And that we got halfway in, and it was a guy broke down with a Bronco, broke the track bar bracket off, and next thing I got Brett under there welding.
But Brett used to run the mechanics crew.
But it was so funny. That's Ken's son. And it was so funny because we're standing on the side of the trail, and some of the old timers, you know, that had been in, they were like, you know, what's he doing here? Yeah.
Yep.
But no, it was, you know, like I said, that used to be the shop over there. But Ken did that, and he handled getting our parts and doing all that stuff because he had a Jeep dealership.
Mm-hmm.
He had two of them, and you know, just all that kind of stuff. The guys that ran the Rotary groups.
Where was his dealership?
Placerville and Tahoe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, was Walker, did he work at that dealership?
No,
or
he
the
worked
Sacramento one.
He either worked or owned one in Sacramento. I know it was
because
Sacramento.
he was the one who put Mike Arnold's gold miner statues on.
I think he was the sales manager. Someone told me that, and I don't remember who.
Yeah, but out of a Sacramento dealership.
Out of a Sacramento dealership.
Now, Steve Morris worked for Ken
in Tahoe.
Yep. Yeah, Steve Morris worked for Ken in Tahoe for a period of time.
Yep.
And if you've ever spent any time with Steve Morris, he will tell you that it used to say right in the Jeep manual. Do you remember what it?
No,
I always you know, back in the old days, they were printed and had actual information in them.
Yeah.
As Jay Leno would say, they don't just say don't eat the battery acid. They you know, would tell you how to do something. He said one of the things that always said was that you keep it in the highest gear that allows forward momentum. And sometimes when I'm going up Cadillac and I'm in Granny and it's just slipping and it won't move, I go, let's put it in another higher gear and see what it does. And by golly, it goes right on up. You know,
wow.
There's sometimes you can be in too slow of a gear. And but that's Steve. That was one of his things he preached all the time.
Yeah, Jay Leno said if you look at a 1956 Chevy manual, in there it will tell you how to adjust the valves.
Yeah.
But if you look at a 2026 Chevy manual, it tells you not to eat the battery.
Yeah. Yep. In many places, in big bold letters. Yeah.
Gosh.
But yeah, that was part of the thing. Was, you know, Jack Warner. He was a logger and stuff. He ran the water truck because it used to be a dirt road from Stumpy Meadows a little way past Stumpy all the way up, and it behooved you to be reasonably close to the water truck. You didn't want to be the first guy because that was a muddy mess. But if you were 100 back, that was a dusty mess. It behooved you to be in that general
25
place. Yeah, 25 is. You ever see the old videos? Everybody's got bandanas and the old videos of this. You know, all the people used to line up. 95% of the Jeeps were still in Anchor or in Georgetown that morning because you got your breakfast.
Oh yeah.
And you got your lunch handed to you in there, and everybody left in a group and went.
Even in 1980, I slept on the street. Put my sleeping bag right down on the street.
That was one of the things I worked
parked in the middle of the road.
I worked for the fire department, and I used to squeeze the center 3 Jeeps and then put the other 2 in because I could tell people logging trucks come through here. You know, they're coming through, and there's fire department.
Not to mention fire trucks.
Well, yeah, we used to sell the balloons, a fundraiser for the volunteer fire department. And the guys would tie them on their Jeeps, and the logging trucks would come by and peel those things right off. They suck them in off the window, the mirror, and boom, they peel the things off. But yeah, everybody used to stay in town back in the day. It was
We got there
quite
the
the
night
party.
before, and the hotel, Georgetown Hotel, is still there, and they partied. I was too young to go inside, but yeah, there was quite a ruckus going on.
Trust me, there was never an age limit on the bars back then. My dad had the miners.
I felt
like
fortunate
I said,
enough just to drink beer in the back of my uncle's Jeep.
See, the advantage I had was I've been this size since I was 12, so nobody ever questioned my age. But my dad had the miners club for, like I said, almost 30 years, and he used to.
So tell us about that. How did your dad get the miners club?
Well, that's an interesting story. But in the mornings when the jamboree would take off, Dad would open up early, and they would send out beer flats with Bloody Marys on them. And Jamboree would buy them, Mark would buy them, and they would just send them out and walk down the street handing out Bloody Marys. Hundreds of them Dad would make.
Can you imagine?
Oh yeah.
Today.
Oh yeah.
25.
Yeah.
Hey, here's some Bloody Marys to leave Georgetown.
Yeah. Make sure you're half lit before you go. Funny. Back in the early 70s, my sister decided she wanted to have a sporting goods store, and she was thinking about a place to put it and this and that. And she had property in Georgetown, and there was a building that is now the office for the fire department that was attached to the miners club. And
so that would be what, 2 up from the VFW?
Yeah, there's the bar used to be. I don't know if it's still there now, but yeah, it's the fire station and the building next to it. It's a 0 lot. That building used to be my dad's.
Okay.
It was that and the miners club were all one piece of thing.
Yeah.
And there was an off and on restaurant there. My dad. So we were kids. And we come up, like I said, I was this size. And we learned that we could walk from my sister's property, which is right across the street from Mark Smith's real estate, Patty's office now, and down the hill there. We would walk into town with a beer. And you'd come in to the bar and, whew, man, put your empty beer bottle down. I'll go ahead and have another one. Well, clearly you're old enough to drink. You have this bottle of beer with you.
Got a beer.
Yeah. So they would sell you a beer. And so they had live music there at times at night, and Walt and Peggy owned the place. And Friday nights, Saturday nights, be busy. We'd help out behind the bar and stuff. And I was...
That's Walt and Peggy Presba.
No. Robbins.
Oh, okay.
Peggy Robbins. And
they owned the miners club before
they
your
used
dad.
They used to have it. And I wasn't even old enough to, I had a license at that point. But we'd be back. Oh yeah, we'll help you out. My dad owns a bar. We'll help you out. And so we're working behind the bar and all this stuff. And then we found out that they wanted to sell the bar. And my dad had retired. He had sold his bar in the Bay Area, and he had retired. And I came home one day, and my dad's got newspapers scattered all over the kitchen table. I said, what's up? I'm looking for a bar. What's wrong? Well, washing machine had a problem, and he swapped and put another washing machine in that day, and there was a thing on washing machines called a sud saver. So they had 2 hoses on them. One discharged, and it would take the water back in. So he puts it in. It's got 2 discharge hoses. He puts one in. It's the wrong.
It's a whole nother channel, John.
Yeah.
Washing machine design.
No, but he puts it in there, and he puts the wrong one in. The washing machine floods all over. He takes it out, cleans it all up, throws all the crap in the dryer, puts it in the dryer, comes catches fire. It's all in the same day. He gets the fire out in the dryer, goes to clean out the rest of the lint, vacuums the lint out of there, sets the vacuum machine on fire. He's done with retirement at this point. He goes out and he buys every newspaper from the Bay Area, and he's going to find a bar to buy. He's done being retired. So, well, the miners club's for sale in Georgetown. Well, how much they want for it? Tell me about it. So we go up the next weekend. We get all the information and come back down. My dad goes up the next weekend. They bought the miners club and a house and moved to Georgetown, bought the bar, ran it for...
Where was your dad's bar in the Bay Area?
It was in Sunnyvale, right near Lockheed and all that stuff, right by the guys that designed the space, went to the moon, literally did the napkin drawings on the bar in there, while they were getting hammered from Lockheed and Singer Link and all those places. And he'd sold that and retired. And then, like I said, they bought the miners club, and he ran that for another pushing 30 years, I think.
Wow.
So he was pretty old by the time.
He was in his 80s, when
Yeah.
he sold it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he was, but he had that, and then the other half of that building, he wanted nothing to do with. They had been using it for a restaurant. He wanted nothing to do with it. And so my sister, that's where she put her sporting goods store, and that's where that's how we all wound up in Georgetown. So, and then we wound up living. We bought the house that Mark's house was they built his house right next door to the one we had. So that's we knew him because we bought the house through his real estate company through Irene, and that's how we knew everybody.
Yeah.
And you look at the list of people on the plaques over there.
I got a question for you
Yeah.
about one of the people on the plaques. So for people who are deep into access and off-road vehicles and the legal end of the Rubicon Trail and all that, everybody knows who Gene Chappie is.
Yeah.
And when I was a young guy and first started with Jamboree, Gene Chappie was one of those guys that I never met him, but he was always there, and it was like one of him and Mark and some of they were elder statesmen to me.
Yes. Oh yeah.
But so I never shook his hand or anything, but I remember him being around. I remember him being there. Tell me some stuff about Gene Chappie.
First thing is if you knew him, he was Gino.
Okay.
Yeah, if you knew him, he was Gino. He drove a lime green Jeep with chrome gas cans on it.
I knew that.
Yep, and he worked at Chappie's Rock up there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've been to a more modern Jamboree, Bob Sweeney does the raffle and does the announcing and all that stuff. And that was Gino's other thing he did was Saturday night. He did the announcements and the raffles and all the stuff.
When I started at Jamboree, Dano Raffetta was doing that.
Yeah, and that was Dano took over after, and they actually kind of later in time tag teamed some of that.
Okay.
And Chappie always wore his red bandana tied in four corners.
Tied in four corners, and there's pictures of him everywhere.
Yep, and
looking like that.
He eventually became a congressman. He was, assemblyman and all the things.
Supervisor. He was a board supervisor in El Dorado
supervisor,
County.
yeah. And then he eventually became a congressman. He did 6 years, I believe. He did not like Washington, the politics and the stuff because you couldn't get things done as a council or supervisor here. There was a small group, and you got things done that directly affected the people you lived with and saw.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not like the politics and the negotiations and the watering down of stuff. And he hated driving his Jeep Wagoneer around Washington, D.C. He used to tell me about that. He hated it. But he always finished every presentation when he would do his thing with, "It's time to go play our favorite game in Rubicon, 10 toes up and 10 toes down."
Oh God!
And anybody that knew Gino would know that. That was his thing. He would
that
do.
was his signature
sign off.
So I have a funny Washington D.C. story for you. I worked in Washington D.C. with the State Department, and Kevin Carey, who we interviewed in episode 1, 2, or 3, something with the beer tree. He's the one who created the beer tree.
Right.
Kevin happened to be working in Washington, D.C., and we met at my hotel, which was a Marriott, and it was around the corner, and Kevin parked his Jeep in front of Ford Theater where Lincoln was shot. And it was just super funny to see how out of place a Jeep on 37s and LED light, a light bar, and
PRPC.
It was like definitely a fish out of water.
Oh, yeah.
So I can only imagine what Gene felt.
Oh yeah, that was Gene. And then when Gene came back, he went to Board of Supervisors. Is it?
Yeah, he went
He
back.
went back, and you ever see his campaign poster?
No.
Because at this point, everybody knew who he was, and he did it because he felt the calling, and his ad because he had his house was right out of Cool, and the family had the Auburn Lake Trails property. That was all the Cherry Acres and all that stuff. That was all stuff in there. So his ad was Gino standing in the field, a man outstanding in his field. And he didn't care what you thought of that. That was, and he won off that simple
and name recognition.
Name recognition.
And the fact that everybody knew he could.
A man outstanding in his field. And just this last year, coming out on one of the trips, the rock right above the graves.
The slab there,
where Kevin, they did all the work last year, 2 years ago. Kevin was standing right in the middle of that, and he's standing like this, watching, and he's telling, when you hold up because this guy's, and I said, Kevin, you look just like Gino's ad, a man outstanding in his field. And I thought he was going to fall over laughing.
Oh my gosh!
But he did. He just, he's all by himself, and he's, out there. But yeah, that was, Gino was, he was a showman. He had that same thing as Mark. I'm going to get it done. I'm going to get it done.
For those who don't know, he
did the green sticker program. Right?
I was just going to say that.
Yeah,
for those who don't know, he designed and pushed through the legislation that makes the off-highway vehicle motorized recreation division a thing.
Yeah.
It didn't exist before that.
Yeah.
And it completely funds, other than what RTF kicks in and matching funds and such and lunches and stuff, but it funds, all of the projects on the trail.
All the projects on the trail, every state vehicle recreation area, every
OHV,
all the OHV parks, all of them. That whole division of state parks is because he pushed through the legislation.
Yeah.
So
because, and that, like I said, that was what he liked to do because it directly affected him and his people he knew and group.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, like I said, that's why he didn't like the Washington gig, because it by the time you got through something, you'd watered it down to the point that it didn't do what
you wanted it to do.
Because I remember talking to him about it a lot, over the years, and especially when he came back and ran again,
So you were, before we were on camera, we were just chit chatting, and you were talking about bottom dollar. Tell us that story.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of places, because like I said, when I first started, there were a few places, Walker Rock, Morris Rock. There were a few places with names, and a whole bunch of them that didn't have names.
Arnold's Rock.
That came as I was on the trip, or on the jamborees. But there's a whole bunch of places that have gotten named afterwards.
Yeah.
And
I'm aware of some places that might have somebody's name on it.
Yeah. And
I didn't name myself.
Bottom Dollar used to be, it was Bottom Dollar Hole.
Yeah.
And it literally was a trench
in the mud
of mud in the trail. And there are some videos that exist that show the guys used to come from Reno, Tahoe, somewhere. I don't know where, the locals. And they would set up there when Jamboree was coming out. And they would bet guys, challenge, because you could go right around it. I mean, it was
there was
you had to choose to go through it.
Mm-hmm.
And they would bet guys about going through it. And guys they'd get in there, and every now and then you'd see somebody make it. But it was just a soupy, muddy mess, and it was like a straight up climb.
And the way they bet was to put sticks in the side with dollars on them.
With money on them.
Yep.
And they would climb. Well, every time another Jeep tried it and didn't make it, all he did was chewed the sides out and made a big hump in the center. And if you didn't have taller tires than the last guy, you were even in worse shape. And back then, again, like I say,
well, there weren't that many.
If you had 31s,
you were a monster.
You were something.
Yeah, you were a monster truck.
We used to, I don't know if you ever saw the guys that would have airplane tires, and we'd groove airplane tires.
I don't remember
because those were
that.
the biggest tires you could get. They were a big balloony tire, and you just groove them.
I didn't remember that, but okay.
Yeah. So guys would try it, and they wouldn't get through it, And there was a guy there with a Bronco from, like I said, I don't know if he was Reno, Tahoe, somewhere, and he'd be parked right off the end of it, and it looked like out of convenience he was showing you, okay, I'll go through it, all right, and he would back down in, and then he'd drive right out. Well, what nobody paid attention to is when he backed in, his skid plate just mowed that center hump right off, and what was holding everybody up, he just mowed it off, going downhill, of course, and then nobody knew he had water-filled tires.
So he'd come
out the other side. He'd get all the money, and then they would start over again. And they would sit there and bet on guys. And when the first trip I came in with, the gentleman I went with, and then he had a friend of his in another Jeep, and my my buddy who in high school had the exchange student, he was in the other vehicle. That guy flopped his on its side in the trench. And then, of course, we had to get it righted and get it out of there and everything. Like I said, you could go right by it without, you didn't have to go.
And where was it located?
Well, my best memory, it's right where I guess it's a 12-mile marker, where you come out of the end of the trail and then you're on the road
where
that goes to
RTF,
staging.
where we put the stone?
Yeah, where the big stone is.
And
yeah.
see, I don't remember it being there at all.
Yeah.
I remember it being just past the potato patch.
Right, and it was off to the left side there, and it was like a big dip there.
And I'm not saying what you remember didn't exist. I'm saying I know what I remember existed.
The one that's what that's what I recall. I'm not 100% sure of that. I know, like I said, because you came up and it was flat, nice ground,
and it was kind of was kind of the end of the trail.
Yeah, it was the end of the trail. That was the last thing that was.
So you used to go up the potato patch. Bottom dollar hole was there. That was the end of the trail, and it was just a dirt road after that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was certainly in the early 80s. That's how it existed.
Yeah.
And now the trail stays difficult, or reasonably so, all the way up until you get onto Barker Pass Road, basically.
Yeah.
And but before you could just drive through it, and used to drive through the meadow there.
Yeah.
It was called 100-mile-an-hour meadow.
Yep. Yeah. And you used to have the car wash out there.
Yeah, the car wash is the bridge just before the parking lot.
Yeah,
now.
They used to be, because there's that same video that was, or movie or whatever that was done, shows the car wash back in the day when they would hit that at 50 miles an hour.
Oh, you had to,
and fans would go into radiators.
Oh yeah.
And you had to, because you just were in bottom dollar hole, and
you had to get all the mud off, and there'd be a crowd of people there.
Oh yeah,
cheering you on and egging everybody.
I think my uncle went back, turned around, and went bit through it like 2 or 3 times.
Yep, that's what
in 1980. This was 1980. Yeah.
Yeah, back in the day, and I remember there was one period of time for maybe 2 years where I don't know who, Forest Service, somebody redid that whole road, cobbled it, beautiful. It was, you could fly out to staging.
That was in 85 or 6.
And it like 2 years later, it was
it was all beat up again.
But it was really nice for just that, like say 1 or 2 years, because I remember coming out going, wow,
this is great, because you were over it by then.
Yeah. And way back when you got out of Jamboree, one of the lodges, moose, elk, somebody had the dinner.
Or the lunch in the afternoon.
It was lunch /
When I went,
dinner.
it was the Elks Club in South Lake.
They moved it every few years. It would move, and back then too, the photos, the posters were all right there.
That's where you would get them.
They were already printed,
dinner,
ready to go. Yeah. I have, I didn't get a lot of them from my early years, because as a worker, you didn't get out in time. That was already done.
It was closed,
Yeah, we were packing up the shop and doing all this stuff, so we never made it out.
Same.
Until we put the little trip in, never made it out in time to do it. Because actually, when I first started, the crews got hotel rooms in Tahoe. They had hotel rooms. Jamboree booked them for us, because it was dark by the time we got out. We would go to the hotel room, spend the night there, and then, go to wherever you were going.
Well, I never got out of. I was not a mechanic. I was a rock roller, and the rock roller stayed until the last mechanic got out, and then we went back and packed our stuff and went out. Yep. So I never got out.
Yeah,
I got to the point where I always just stayed till Monday.
Yeah,
it just wasn't worth it.
Yeah. Well, and then back when we had that old '53 flat fender or Willys flatbed, that thing by the time we got it into Tahoe, the clutch was so bad that I used to have to push it off the stoplights to get it to roll. And then I'd push it with my Bronco and it'd get rolling, and then they could get it. Roy Manwaring used to drive it most of the time. And that old beast, man, we brought that thing in. It would always break at least one center pin, and it'd always blow up either a front end or a rear end every year. But it weighed 11,000 pounds.
I remember how much I enjoyed helping you up Cadillac Hill.
With that thing. Oh, God, yeah.
I think that was sarcasm.
Maybe.
Oh, man, that thing was a beast. Just a beast.
Well, I'm not disappointed that they stopped bringing that.
Yeah. Well, it went from that to, was it a J2000? It was a Jeep pickup from Jeep Corporation gave it to us. And the first year they brought it in, it was bone stock, never lift nothing, and beat it to death. And then we lifted it and put some guardrail on it, and we used that for a few years, and then they went to flying stuff in, and then they went to leaving stuff here in the buildings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because they flying stuff in and out. You had to fly it out first thing in the morning because it was cool to lift the heavy stuff, and they had those big Army containers, and one of them slipped and it broke a guy's leg when they were trying to do all that. And yeah.
Okay, speaking of heavy things, we're going to change the subject here, and I think you know where I'm going, is the grand piano, when they would bring the piano in here. So
Right where we're sitting.
we are literally having this where the piano was.
The overhead wasn't there,
No.
and they would just set it right
There
here.
was, we came in on one work party, and they said we wanted to we need a platform right here, right where the lunch or the dinner lines split.
Yeah, we're at the
Yeah.
split of the Jeepers Jamboree, this side and this side, where the line splits.
They said,
And a band plays here. Like,
They'll have a little, couple piece
Little-
band,
yep.
or they'll, they just said, we want this platform built. Mark said, I want this platform built here. What for? Just build a platform here. Okay. So we built a platform.
what year is this? Roughly? I won't.
Wow. Probably early 80s. Early 80s. And if you've ever been to Jamboree, one thing you know is that everything you eat on is made of paper or plastic. Paper plate, napkins, silverware.
Yeah.
So we built this platform. Okay. Well, Mark was pretty famous for doing something bold during the Jamboree. They brought in the bagpipe band one time. Flew in a whole bagpipe band. They come marching into camp.
And the choir.
The choir. And
A choir of nuns. Literally,
Nuns.
a choir of nuns.
actual nuns.
Walked out and sang for
Yeah.
everybody.
Can girls one year. Well, so he wanted to make this dramatic entrance with a grand piano. So they flew it in. Right as just before dinner is getting ready to start, because they had a guy in a black tail tuxedo
Came out and played the
and
piano.
and he had a candelabra, the whole bit. That's what was coming.
Rubicon Liberace.
Okay, so they come in, and they've got a helicopter with this thing on a sling line.
And,
While everybody's here in camp.
and
while everybody's
pianos are heavy. That's why there are piano movers.
And all this stuff is set up in the kitchen. The paper.
All the paper plates.
The barbecue's going.
The
whole
napkins.
9 yards. And here comes a helicopter. We didn't know what was coming. He didn't tell anybody.
Oh my God.
Here comes this helicopter. So we guide it to this platform. The other thing nobody told us is, how do you disconnect a piano from a helicopter?
Yeah.
So I'm standing, reaching up, and I'm trying to unhook it. And as I'm doing that, I see that he has tripped the release up on the helicopter.
Oh no.
Here
And
comes
And here it all comes. And I fell down, which is a good thing I did, because it would have went right through the piano. I mean, it would have he just, and all this. Well, when I fell down, it all fell off to the side. Luckily, it didn't kill me.
Oh my
But it all came
God.
down. Meanwhile, the cook crew is trying to chase down all the paper plates.
Complete chaos.
Oh, yeah. And eventually, then.
And half the fire is out of the
Oh,
pits.
yeah. Everything's on fire around the barbecue, and then we go to set it up, and there's no pedals. And there's no top. The top they left off because they're heavy. But they also no pedals on the piano.
So the piano player had to figure it out.
Well, Brett Collins is quite a musician in that. And he said, well, I know what so he bent up some metal over there. We climbed underneath it to put them in. And, oh, hey, they're right up here underneath it. They were like
They're bolted
wired
to
up
the bottom.
inside, bolted in or whatever. So we put them on.
Oh my God.
And it was so funny because these are rentals. They don't tell the guy what they're doing. They'd fly it in here, and they'd leave it here for a couple of weeks, and they would then they'd fly them out, and and if you ever, from the old days, when I first started coming in here, like along the road right here out of camp, used to be lined with bed frames and piano carcasses.
It was old stuff out of the hotel.
Yeah, out of the hotel, and there was car frames and drive shaft tubes, and a lot of that stuff got used up, especially the bed frames. We fixed, I couldn't tell you how many tie rods with those. But they used to bring in on a truck upright pianos way back in the day. And they would go buy one at a garage sale or whatever, someplace, and they'd bring it in here, and by the time it got here, half the was out of tune in it, but they would use it for that weekend, and then they just leave it here. And in the winter, it would get destroyed.
And then, but all those pianos aren't just wood. They have
No,
all have a
a lot
big
of
metal frame. And
metal frame.
Yeah.
And those frames, you can still find pieces of them around here and there.
I remember when I first started for Jamboree, I was like, look at that, it's a piano, and I was shocked. And by the time I had a few years on, I'm like, there goes the piano.
Yeah, there goes the piano.
Back to work.
Yeah. There was stuff that flew in here, but yeah, that was, like I said, it was a great surprise, unfortunately, to all of us. The people were just like, oh my gosh, but the cook crew, yeah, you talk about
what a mess.
Oh man.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine.
Mess. Yeah, it. But that was, like I said, there was, the bagpipe band. There was the coordination of the jets that flew over the one time. That was Dan Orofetto's son, I believe.
To an Air National Guard flyover, there is never a dull moment.
So I was working at Spider Lake at that time before I owned a piece of it, and the crew stayed at what we called mechanics camp, which was up at the top of Sluice, right?
Yep.
Since then, it's been renamed Pirate Camp. So I'm standing there with by the time Jamboree quit using it, the pirates started using it. Anyway. So I'm standing there with my son Darien, who's now 44. And he was about
you and me both, brother.
Yeah.
I got one that's ready to retire.
Yeah. And he's about 5 years old or something. So it's been 40 years since that jet thing. And I heard the jets coming, and I didn't know what was coming because it was a surprise.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I didn't know what was coming, but we're standing there, and man, that thing came over. And when it came over, they were already on their way down into the canyon when they came over Spider. So they had turned on their side and were coming down, and we could see the pilots looking down at us,
Yeah.
And it was so loud and hit so hard.
Yeah.
It knocked Darien over, and he's 6 years old with his face in the dirt, has no idea what happened and never saw the jet.
Yeah, because when they came through here, they were just over the top.
How many jets were there?
There were two.
Two that I remember, yeah. That's what I remembered.
Yeah.
And Dano's son was one of them, I want to say.
Or he arranged it or something.
He arranged it or something,
Yeah, I think they were, back then, I think they were probably F-14s.
Yeah, probably.
And an F-14, people think of them being a nimble fighter jet, but they're huge.
They're giant.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah,
and
they had to do the swept wings so that they could park them on the carrier.
Yeah.
And these guys flew right over us 30 feet off the deck.
Yeah.
It was wild.
Yeah. That was, like I said, the stuff they arranged. I remember first time the dance floor and the band area there. We need you to build this little platform off to the side and put a tarp around it. We would need an 8-foot wall, around it.
I remember it.
Yeah. For the can-can dances. Yep.
Now, if can-can's not your style, how about a slightly slower?
Yep. And they did a bunch of dancing, right? Well, nobody told us what it was for. Just build this. It's a changing room. Build this. They didn't say put a roof on it. So very quickly after guys were all around watching the can-can girls dance, and then they came out in a different outfit, they figured out, hey, they go in there and take their clothes off, and they all ran up on the big rock behind the stage looking down into the changing room. So we had to go up there and chase them all out, and we had to put a group of guys there to keep everybody out because there was no roof on the changing room.
Can I be the security?
Yeah,
I'm sure there was a lot of volunteers.
It was, and then we had to have a guy on each side of the stage on the dance floor because they'd want to go out and grab the girls or dance or whatever. So one of us would get on each side of the stage and drag them back out.
So I wasn't here for that.
Yeah.
That was...
It'd be my story too.
No, I mean... fair.
Deny.
No, that was... I think that was probably in the mid-'80s.
Yeah.
And it was before...
That sounds about right.
So I didn't start working for Jamboree till I was 30 in 1990.
Wow, just
which was the 40th. That's why I got hired, because they needed extra
40th was the 92.
Okay, 92.
Yeah.
So they needed extra rock rollers. Yeah, that's right, because this is my 34th year.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
You math major over here.
So
Yeah. Nobody said we were going to do math while we're doing this interview here.
So that was before my time. But do you remember what happened? Do you remember what happened to the Can girls' little changing area?
No. What?
They put pipes in the ground with funnels, and it became the piss room.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So for years, there were pipes with funnels, and if you needed to pee when you were out here partying, you'd go in this little cloth room and pee in a funnel.
First or second year when the girls were dancing, someone who will remain nameless was one of the security guys on the side, and this dude kept going up and trying on the dance floor. And he'd warned him, and he'd pulled him back a few times, and finally he just caught him by the ankles and dropped that guy in his face, and his nose blew up all over that dance floor. But yeah,
oh, man.
Well, and I remember we had a big old brawl broke out at something. I don't remember what happened. There was a brawl on the dance floor, and we used to have a judge that was a committee or a crew member, and this guy popped the judge, and he said, "Congratulations, you're going to jail. You just hit a federal judge," and they arrested him.
Oops.
Well, I remember the pilot, the kid. And they arrested somebody one night. Normally, when they arrest somebody in here, they just handcuff them to a tree
or whatever, and let them go.
They just wait it out. For some reason or other, this guy was under arrest.
I remember it, and I know why.
Yeah, and kids, I'll fly him out. It's friggin' midnight, and he's in the low pad right behind the rock, and they put that guy in there, and we're like, that kid's crazy, and straight up he goes, pitch black, and flies off. We're like, that kid is crazy. What was even crazier is about 2 hours later, we hear whoop, 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 and it's dark in here at 2 o'clock in the morning. And he flew back in and landed on that pad behind the rock in the pitch black.
Wow.
And back in the old days, they used to give rides in the helicopters.
Yep.
They used to.
Emily got I think Emily got the last ride because it crashed shortly thereafter.
Yeah. We had few crashes over the years. They used to do rides off observation.
5 crashes.
Yeah, at least. The last one I remember was at Buck Island. Yeah.
Yeah, Daryl Warden was on it on that one.
And we had one off of observation, and it was so funny is they'd be selling rides on the low pad down here.
Yep.
And we've got Jeeps lined up, jump starting the helicopter in the morning because the NICADs wouldn't hold overnight. And here's my $5 for my ride, and there's 3 beat up Jeeps jump starting this helicopter, and these people, oh God, my ticket, I'm going. He used to laugh, but so in the morning, he's out there on a ladder, and he's cleaning the rotor. So what are you doing? He says, I got to get this green off here before Dad sees it.
That was Mel. Oh God, what was
Rufus.
his last name?
The kid was Rufus.
And his 3 kids flew for him.
3 kids, yep. And Rufus was...
Mel Kane.
Yeah.
And his 3 kids.
And Rufus was the youngest.
And Curtis.
Well, and Rufus was flying when they crashed off of observation. They rolled off observation. And he tore his hand up. He's on the stick over here. Tore his hand up. And they flew him in to the upper pad. His brother flew him down. They said, come into camp, get the doctor.
That would be Mel. It was, what was it? Sorry.
Yeah.
Mel, Curtis, anyway.
Yeah.
Curtis.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure it was
the other kid.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they said, and so I went up there and I was a paramedic and went up there, they said, wait here for the doctor. We had one of those Playmate ice chests with his hand stuck in it, and we're waiting for the doctor, and he's like, I can't wait anymore. And he takes off because this is his brother, he takes off, and just as he takes off, here comes the doc popping up on the rock. I said, sorry, Doc, I tried. They told him to wait. He says, oh, they'll be back. And I said, well, no, they're going into Tahoe. And he goes, oh, they'll be back. He says, I'm the only hand surgeon in Tahoe. and no shit. A while later, boom, here comes this helicopter.
To pick him up.
Yeah, he left him at the hospital, but he came back to get it. He says, yeah. Doc says, I'm the only hand surgeon in Tahoe. That's why they said wait for him, But that was, back then, though, we didn't have the radios like we do now.
Yeah.
Right.
We had a couple of portables. and that was it. And they were the brick with the giant antenna and
The telescoping, you had to pull it out.
you had to pull it out when you wanted to use
Yep.
it, and then you couldn't walk around and expect to hear somebody. You know, you were going to have a conversation, and okay, so I'm going to, and we we had a guy from, I want to say he was from Maine, and we fought this Jeep coming in, fought it. It was a fiberglass body, Jeep from Maine, so the rust, and that's why it had a fiberglass body. And I know at one point the emergency brake cables had rusted, closed on it, and all this other stuff. And it was just, everything was wrong with this Jeep. And at this point, the firewall had broke out because the fiberglass body, but they didn't put any metal in there. So I'm standing on a rock near Arnold's rock, because I'm trying to get talking down to camp.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy's standing right next to me. And I call into camp, and they go, well, what is the problem with this Jeep? You know, why do we keep having to go out there and fix it? He says, what is the problem with this Jeep? And I said, it appears to be the connection between the seat and the steering wheel. And this guy, without missing it, goes, do they have those in camp? I mean, just right, you know, which proved my point, that the problem was the connection between the seat and the steering wheel.
Which it often is.
It often is, yeah, you know. Which, you know, I see.
And sometimes you can fix it.
Sometimes.
Little training.
Well, back in the day when they had the corporate Jeeps coming in, they had the country on the back, you know, where they're from. And two things were so funny about that. Sometimes you'd get the right-hand drive Jeep, and the rock roller's looking at the passenger, and he's little left, little right. Meanwhile, the guy picks his camera up, and he's doing this, and the rock roller's like, dude, you know, well, that's the guy driving over there. You're looking at the wrong guy.
Well, the other problem with that is, from a rock roller's perspective,
yeah.
What directions am I giving?
Yeah.
Driver. No. Never mind. We'll go left and right.
The funniest one was, we had I don't remember the country, so I don't know. I don't remember. But we had, you know, couldn't speak to him. No, you couldn't. And been trying to get him to not use the clutch. Stop riding the clutch. Stop riding the clutch. Stop riding the clutch. Stop riding the clutch. Finally, I stopped the guy. We got him stopped. And I come up and I just reach inside the cab and I pull his foot back, untie his shoe, and I tie it to the seat frame. And I just reached in, hit the steering, started it.
Yeah.
And the Jeep starts going. He's definitely, and then all of a sudden, like, the light came on, and he smiles and he looks back. I get it, you know. And he just drove the Jeep, and you know. Then he stopped and he fixed it, but he understood what we were saying is, don't mess with the clutch. You know.
We were here in the early '80s. I think it was right at the very first or second year they started the corporate trip.
Yeah.
And somebody saw the sign on the little sluice box of the speed limit. I think it said 35 or 25 miles an hour. I don't remember. And they destroyed their Jeep.
Yeah.
Trying to go that fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would have been 80, I think 87.
It was, yeah.
That was the first year of the
sounds
YJ.
about right.
87, that's the year we stole the YJ.
Yeah, that's the first year of the YJs, yeah.
Well, the first trip, the first Jamboree, big trip, that's when we learned that when you smack the fuel tank on a YJ, it pushed the fuel pump up the rod it's mounted on, and it kinked the hose over and killed him. And so you had to drop the tank, pull the top out, fix it, and what we did is we cut it shorter, and then we fixed it. But, you know, the tank's full. It's a pain in the butt. So between trips, Larry Anderson and I figured out that in the body right back here, there's a wire loom, and there's an ignition hot wire, and you can stuff a hose into the gas cap, take the gas cap off, stuck a hose in, mount a fuel pump up here, run a line up, and you can make the Jeep run off of it. It doesn't run worth a damn because we didn't know the pressure of the fuel pump, but it ran. So we came across one just past Spider that's on the side of the trail, abandoned. Guys had walked into camp, or I don't know what they did. But we had the whole setup with us because we weren't going to drop a tank out on the trail again. This is stupid. We're not doing this. So yeah. Larry and I, we rig it up, and Larry drives that, and I drive my rig in, and his wife drove her flat fender in. And we get into camp, and back then, where the owner's property is back here, that used to be called Smutville, and that's where all the mechanics camped.
I still call it that.
Yeah, I do too. But that's where all of us mechanics camped, is back in there. We took that Jeep, we pulled it in there, we threw a tarp over it. We took every piece of paper in it that had anything to do with the corporate out of it. We hung house keys, everything on the key ring. we just made it look like it belonged.
Somebody's
we
Jeep.
kept it covered up because this was on Friday. Coming in, we picked it up, and corporate guys come over and go, "Hey, we left a Jeep out there on the trail. Did you guys see it?" Nope, we didn't see it.
Excuse me. Excuse me. All right, move on. Nothing to see here. Please disperse. Nothing to see here, please.
Well, eventually, we know we got to fix it. So that's when the mechanic shop was here. So on Saturday, later Saturday, Larry goes and drives it over here, and of course they used to be in where Rockroller Camp is up here was the committee area.
The meadow, yeah.
And that's where all the mucky mucks camped, and so the corporate guys come over here. That's our Jeep. No, it's not. Larry says, that's my Jeep. I just bought it. What are you talking about? So meanwhile we're dropping the tank out of it. We're working on it, and they bring over a higher mucky muck, and he comes over and that's our Jeep. No, we're working on it. I mean, it had bumper. We put the Jamboree bumper stickers on it. We put everything. We decked it out. Ice chest, the whole 9 yards.
Kids, don't try this at home.
No, don't try this at home. And then they bring it over another mucky muck. And he walks right around, comes around the passenger side, reached up on top of the glove box, pulls out a piece of paper, and he goes, that's our Jeep. Oh, okay, it's your Jeep. Meanwhile, Ken says, Collins, he says, don't say anything to him about it. He said, they spent a fortune on a helicopter looking for that thing all day.
Oh,
they
boy.
Were flying up and down the trail all day looking for that Jeep.
Oh, my God.
He said, don't say anything, but just
Let
fix it and let it go. Yeah. Well, back in the day, that back here, they used to be the doctor's tent was back there.
Mm-hmm.
Mark's tent was back there. And we're talking about Al's Jeep. Well, Al's Jeep, the front end went out, and then we didn't. Turns out the front end was probably out before we ever got in the jungle. We just didn't know that because the Jeep hadn't been with us. Then it lost a rear axle, and we fixed it, and it had another rear axle, and we fixed
Corporate
it.
20.
Yeah, and well,
Terrible.
the first one we put on, we didn't torque the nut enough because they were brand new. Nobody knew, So then but they eventually spin loose, especially when it doesn't have a front end. Well, then we were just towing that Jeep everywhere, so we started cannibalizing it for parts. The winch cable. Mark needed a winch cable for his Jeep because they break and stuff, and so we started, we needed a fair lead, and, we started cannibalizing it for parts. Well, then when, years later in here, Al and Mark are back and forth. Al, hey, get my parts. I want, I'm sure.
I want my winch cable back.
I want my winch. So the mechanics, we'd put it on, we'd go take the cable off, and then Mark would be, and he'd go yell at Al for us taking his winch cable off. Then we would do something, on the other side. And those two would argue with, jokingly, but argue with each other. Meanwhile, we're doing the stuff over here and nobody. So we thought, so that I'll fix him. So he gets Mark's suitcase and he has us take a piece of welding rod and put it through the latches on his suitcase and weld it. That was fine until after it got in the tent and we found out it was Jill's suitcase, not Mark's.
Oh, boy.
Boy, were we in trouble then. But yeah, there was all those, and then we had a bunch of steaks that went bad one time. They were like on the top of the pile of steaks and they thawed too much and they got gamey. So Greg took those steaks and hit them all over Al's Jeep, up in the transfer case skid pan, up on top of the glove box. And Al would go 5 feet down the truck, and he'd get out and dig around.
Find another one.
Oh yeah, you feel these gamey, especially because they sat here for a couple days before they went out, and then you start heating them up. Oh yeah,
my God!
They used to play all kinds of games. Trying to think of anybody else on the plaques over there that.
Well, we have a bunch of names here to go.
Yeah,
through.
Yeah. There's.
We talked about most of them.
Yeah, old Doc Bliss. Back in the day, there used to be doctors here all the time.
There was always a doctor.
There was a doctor. That was
always at least one.
There was a tent and we had all the stuff, and there was a doctor here all the time and stuff. And I remember. Old Doc Bliss, he would come in on the work party, and he used to stay in the stone cabin. When he'd come in, he stayed in the stone cabin out there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he'd come in here and if you've ever been here, when you're feeding 1,000 people, a few thousand people, you buy in bulk. And the eggs come in those big things. They're liquid, and then they pour them in the pan. And
except for that frozen thing in the center.
Yeah, and then, eventually, but they're stirring them, and it's just a yellow liquid. And just about the time that stuff got slightly above room temperature, that's where Doc Bliss wanted them. And you'd see everybody just like, he'd go scoop those out, and we'd just be like, well, how can you eat those things? But yeah, that was I remember that was the thing with him. He was, oh, and I told you my Merlin story, but we'll probably leave that one out.
Probably.
Yeah.
Seems like we shouldn't get that on film.
No. But yeah. Merlin, it's funny, when I came through here in 2001 with my expedition, when I told you I made the one that went all the way through,
So
Merlin was
49th.
he was caretaken here. And I didn't know that, I mean, I hadn't been.
I think that was his first year.
It was first year they were
because
doing it.
I met him here. We were here, and he came walking over.
So you're talking about 1991.
91, yeah.
That was his first year.
Yeah, and so I'm like, hey, what are you doing here?
He called my flat fender my buffet Jeep because I had all my stove and all my food and everything was just laid out all on the flat parts of it.
Yeah, but no, there was a lot of the like I said, a lot of the folks that are on those plaques over there. I had there's a few people over there that are I don't recognize the names, but I think they were they're more just like people that came
Friends
in
of
here a lot.
friends
They
or
weren't
whatever,
they weren't necessarily committee people or jamboree people or
RSSI people or
and people from the way back in the day. But yeah, it's funny when you were talking, you guys were interviewing with Mike and Sherry, the names that you guys were going through, and I'm just like, wow, I know all those people or knew them, knew them or know them, one or the other, Well, we were talking, you guys were talking, about Kenny, Mike's brother.
And I never knew him. Never met him.
He was.
We heard he was a character.
Yeah, he was. He was a character. Tough. That was a tough man. He crashed a Jeep at one time, somewhere in Placerville area or somewhere, and he broke his back. He might have broke his leg too, but I know he had a passenger, and he helped get the passenger out and up to the road, busted up like that, and he was a tough guy. I mean, just physically, mentally. You see the interview on the expedition thing where and you can just see the personality that he had and the temp and the he was something else, and a force to be reckoned with, as it were.
The reason I'm here is the thrill of it, I think. I'm into different things that interest me, and this is one of them, jeeping.
He quit his job to go on the trip.
Mm-hmm.
He worked for the county, and they couldn't give him time off, and he quit. He said, no, I'll just quit.
I mean...
Which, you got to think about it in perspective.
Yeah.
When you're 25 years old or 30 years old, and you have this job, and you've had it for 5 or 10 years, that's such a huge thing to quit a job like that.
Pension
and all that stuff. But looking backwards, who wouldn't?
Oh yeah, but yeah. It that was part of the issue with a lot of.
It's never going to happen again, and it really hasn't happened again.
Nope.
A lot of the people that were going to go, that was when they faced it head on, it's like
well, and at that point, if you have kids or a wife or a family or whatever, all these obligations, a mortgage.
Yeah.
Are you gonna sell your house to do this?
Yeah. That was Mike and Kenny put a heck of a commitment, because they were right in that 30s, mid 30s ish, businesses, family, all that stuff. That was like say me, I was a dumb kid. What did I know? And then we had guys that were well off or well into their career and could
afford to do
and had people that could take care of their business.
Right. Mark
for
Smith
him
could.
Yeah, Ken Collins had people that could run his businesses.
Sure.
and that kind of thing. Al Grimm, same way. He had trucking industry, and he had his family and people that could run that stuff. But there was a period of time when that wasn't available for a lot of we had
and if it was available for you, you probably didn't have the money to do the trip because you probably weren't.
And that was a good reason why a lot of the people bailed out or didn't go.
And I know several people that were gonna go and never did.
And just the logistics of it would to act, and especially to do the entire trip. We had some guys that were able to do a section, but to commit to the whole thing was a big deal.
Yeah.
We had a couple of pilots that came and did the jungle. And now you got to understand too, when the British went through in 72, they took 90 days to do it. And they killed like 14 guys, drowned. And, they took 90 days. That's why we started at the very beginning of the dry season, because we anticipated it was potentially going to take 90 days. And so now that's another, even if you were only going to do that section, can you make a 90-day commitment,
Yeah.
As it turned
Right, well,
out, it wasn't, but it could have
But
been.
as far as you knew.
Yeah, as far as you knew, But we had some people that they knew all they were going to do was go through South America. The photographer, the National Geographic photographer that came through the jungle, Bob Torin, he's written a few books and has a lot of pictures from in there. His wife went through South America with us, and she got pictures and things from there. He went through the jungle. Bob was 68 years old when he did that.
Wow.
He was, and he's using the old, portrait camera, 135 millimeter, I think they were some. And I mean, the pictures are just amazing. The quality of what they do with that camera, but also, Bob had the eye.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had that. Like I said, I was the youngest. Bob was the oldest on the trip, but we had a range of people from all over. Same thing you see here. Same thing you see here. I got two of my sons that work as mechanics on the trail now. And
who besides Mike is your son?
My other son, Mike. I have two Michaels. Well, that's a whole nother story.
I shouldn't have asked.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of them lives in Georgetown. The other one lives in Alaska. And
that's why he's Alaska Mike.
He's Alaska Mike, and the other one's Georgetown Mike. Yeah.
And that's how we ended up with Stockton Rob.
Yep. Yep. And Cowboy, because Cowboy's name is Mike also.
He is.
But to get rid of some of the confusion, he goes by Cowboy too.
George Foreman named all of his kids
George. Yeah, I know. He
George.
had 5 of them, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're all George Foreman.
Yeah. So
he said that way there's no arguing over
I've had
the name. Yep.
Several of the only other person that's driven my Jeep in here since I've owned it is my grandson. He drove it in 18 or 19, and we came in from work party with the trailer on it, and he was coming in with me, and we got to staging, and we were late staging, and I got in the passenger seat. All right, get in, boy. And he was 15.
He's probably terrified.
And drove it in here, and so then I said, hey, he was down from Alaska. I said, you want to come next week for Jamboree? So we had him practice all that week that when was his actual birthday, because he was actually only 15. And we went in, he had to be 16, so he would practice his birth date so he could, because he's a big kid,
Yeah.
And he came in on work party. That was the year that I took out my oil pan and the spring hanger and everything out there. And we came in, we got here to the Mudhole Bypass, 2:30 in the morning. And at that point, we're out of oil. We've used all the oil we could scrounge, and we patched the pan as best we could. And we get to there, and no oil pressure and making noise. The only thing we had left was 3 quarts of power steering fluid. So we poured that in, and we drove in 3 quarts of power steering fluid. And Trevor's group brought in an oil pan for me, and we just left the Jeep sit in camp there, which was really nice because if you leave them sit for 2 or 3 days, the crank's done dripping. So when we dropped the pan off, we didn't have, you ever
nice
drop
and clean,
a fresh pan, it's like dripping all over, it was
Yeah.
all done. It was all in the pan, done. We dropped it, put a new pan on, and it still doesn't leak. That thing works perfect.
Doesn't leak, it's fine.
Yeah. So that was a rough year. This year, coming down Cadillac coming down Big Sluice, midnight, it's raining, and that greater than 90 left turn where you got to do a couple jogs. I should have done one more. I went down like this and I slipped off that rock and smacked the windshield frame on the rock, and didn't break the window, but I did bend up right where the door is going to be. So I'll have to fix that before I can put my top on.
You've got to stop driving that thing.
I know. You're not the first one to tell me that.
I think I said it 3 times in this interview.
Yeah, I know. And if somebody wants to, the Jeep is not going anywhere, but if somebody wants to hand me enough cash to build one like yours, I'd be happy to.
I hear you.
Yeah. And that's, this year, well, that's why I steal my wife's Jeep as much as I can now. And she even agrees to it. I started stealing it when she was out of town, and I would bring it in. And now that she's back in town and is aware of it, she lets me take it on work parties and different things but this year on main trip, she's was driving.
Off camera shaking her head right now.
Yeah, she wasn't. That was the only thing she was shaking. This year though, on big trip, she drove her Jeep in, and so I had to bring mine in. So
didn't have a Jeep.
Yeah. because she does not like sitting on the side of the trail waiting for me to fix Jeeps, especially when you wind up there all day long.
That can happen.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't get in until the next day. That happened, 3 years ago for us? Yeah, we didn't get into here until the next day.
$80.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yep. Yeah. We were coaching one of our people that we've dealt with many times. Yeah. Who will remain nameless.
Well, what do we think? Can we do?
Do you have anything else?
I don't think so. I think we got enough.
We've knocked out everything on the list. Yeah.
I think we need to.
So unless he's got a story about his OnlyFans Rubicon page, I think we're done.
Yeah.
Great. Well, if you
but
want
she
to wrap
can
it
point
up,
out where hers are on the bar over there if you'd like.
Yeah, Emily's are over there too.
So anyway, it's been a great morning, afternoon, rainstorm.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Now the weather's getting nice.
Now the weather's getting nice, but really, thanks so much for the interview. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Happy to do it.
And
as you can tell, I love talking about this place.
Yeah.
Didn't notice.
Yeah. We had a work party last year to build the mechanics pit.
Yeah.
We built the new top, and a bunch of the guys there, and Mike Jarendenkas handles the building stuff here. And I was already working on work parties when Mike brought his first time he came in, and he said, "Hey, Tim, tell these guys the story of the first time I came in." He came in a CJ7 with quadratrac, and we're towing him on flat ground. He's stuck. We're towing him everywhere. And back in those days, the Georgetown people used to go out this way because it was closer.
Oh, yeah.
Back Georgetown. Well, first thing he gets a flat, and it turns out the tire on the back of his Jeep, when they uncover it, fits a Buick. Doesn't even fit. It's got a little hole in the middle, it's like that.
No.
And so he gets my Bronco tire. We put it on the front, and we're towing him everywhere. We're going up big sluice, and I'm dragging the Rotary's ice chest out, no suspension on it, dragging it out. We're going out, and we get out somewhere around Buck, and also we can't catch Mike. He's gone. He just keeps going. And we get up by Arnold Rock, somewhere up in there, and he's waiting for us. Mike, what did you learn what happened? He says, I found this knob in the dash. It said turn for emergencies. He had never locked the quadratrac. and we're all looking at him like, you didn't consider this an emergency staging when we were towing you? And, so yeah, he was, and he started a couple of years after I started.
Yeah, he was one of Bill Butt's guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And remember, he would climb all over as a carpenter, he's walking all over the beams and everything, and all of us are just like, I'd fall down and kill myself if that was me. He's running across rafters and stuff. Yeah. So we had somebody about 5-6 years ago bring a Jeep in with a quadratrac, and he comes in, he's got a problem with it. And he's talking to Jeff in the shop, and Jeff's kind of staring at this guy, and he gets all done talking, and Jeff goes, not only do I not know it, I've never even seen a quadratrac.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, because he works on all his
new stuff. Yeah.
And all of a sudden he turns and he looks over at me, and I said, not only have I worked on them, I actually have the service manual in my Jeep, because my Jeep doesn't have a quadratrac, but the service manual's the same. And so we dropped the transfer case, and we had a class about quadratrac and how they shift and everything. That was all it was a little shifter. We fixed it, but it was pretty funny. He says, I've never even seen one. But yeah. So
anyway,
let's do it.
Yeah, go ahead and wrap it up again.
Sorry about that.
Okay, you can't unwrap it.
Okay.
Anyway, Tim, thanks for meeting us down here. Thanks for chatting with us about your history and about the tip to tip trip and your time with Jamboree. It's really been a pleasure.
Yeah, and that's nice to meet. I've never met you before, even though I've been here a million times. But yeah, it was a pleasure.
No, I had a good time.
All right.
And technically, you guys met me. I was already here camping.
That's true.
That's true.
So, as usual, thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and
comment.
And
let's go wheeling.
Let's go wheeling.
John Larson is as a ghost here yelling at you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go. So let's go wheeling.
We got to go back.
We got to get out of here.
All right, let's do it on 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Let's go wheeling.